Hello, everybody. This is the Trampled Underfoot podcast show with two hosts from different sides of the country completely.
Yeah.
Completely different backgrounds, completely different experiences here, this, and there, and everywhere. To lead a better life, I need my friend love to be here. And you can't even name what band sang that song because I
You're
sang
right. I can't.
here, making each day of the year.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, hell. I've heard it. I don't know.
I'll
I
give
don't.
you a hint. Four lads from
Oh, the
across the way.
Beatles.
Yeah,
Good God.
here, there, and everywhere.
Yes. Phew. Don't do that to
Um,
me.
that's
This getting old stuff is not for sissies. Okay, because I do that stuff all the time. I blank on words. I blank on things. I can't think of the name of something. I see it. It's right there. I can pick it up. I can hold it in my hand. I can hand it to you. I got no clue what the hell it's called.
wow.
I do that. It's like,
So nothing. It's another Tuesday night, and I ain't got nobody. And it's Mark Lindsay from out there out west where cowboys roam the prairies, and it's Eloy over here where the salsa music is so steaming caliente that we can't help but salsa down the streets every night, constantly. That's what I'm doing after the show. I don't know about the rest of you, but there's a conga line right now forming, and that's what we do all the time.
yeah, it's funny because most of the cowboys are east of me, and you say they're out west. I think it's funny.
We're gonna go ahead and make some sort of theme here, and I'm trying to squish it all into this
Yeah,
paella, a
yeah.
paella of love and sexiness. Um,
Meanwhile, I'm out here in the repressed part of the country where we're going to party like it's 1899.
oh yeah, well we're here down in the southeast in Miami, where even the guys wear g strings.
Phew. That's a pro tip for all you men thinking about it. It's summertime. It's hot. We're thinking about getting bathing suits and stuff like that. Pro tip for you guys: when you thinking about you find a bathing suit you like, you're thinking about it, take it into the fitting room, put it on, then look at yourself in the mirror. If you can't tell what color that bathing suit is from the front, you need a bigger suit. That's just all I'm going to say.
And that's gonna do all of us a favor.
Everybody, every male out there, you women, you wear what you want. I ain't getting into that. But men, if you look at yourself in that mirror and you can't see what color that bathing suit is, you need a bigger suit.
You don't see. You don't. You're not thinking. You're not thinking European trends and culture.
You're
I don't.
absolutely right. This is America. We don't play that game. I don't.
I
You're
don't think.
scaring the kids. Stop it.
See, I think you've missed the last few runway. When they come out with like a beach ball or like umbrellas and they walk the catwalk and this and that. One of those things. I think
I
you've missed
missed
the
every one
last
of them.
few.
I have.
Well, you're
I
not
have.
up to par
You're
with
right.
with the latest whatnots.
You're right.
That's very culturally disturbing.
Not to
Because
me.
I'm on it, man. I know the latest wardrobes.
Not. It's not disturbing to me. Not when it looks like a butterball turkey is stretched out on a beach towel. Cover up, dude. You're scaring the kids.
You know, I've been donning this one,
Hmm.
and I've noticed that the same thrill from other people from back in the day.
Hmm.
Oh, cool, man! Yeah, like it's because the generational changes.
Hmm.
This is almost looking like probably a polka, some sort of Swedish, um, like costume, sort of like some sort
Oh,
of
cosplay. Yeah.
yeah. It's looking like something like so from a
Arcane. Well, that's me. That's why I chose that name, Citizen Arcane. That's me. You know, uh, the old, and in fact, that kind of dovetails in with the topic that I had for tonight. I know you have some things,
I have something, but let's do that.
but before we get going on anything, last week, Eloy recommended a video by Rick Beato talking about why music isn't as important now as it was back then. And there were a bunch of reasons for his conclusion.
Yeah.
And I went and found it. It intrigued me. Your description of it intrigued me. So I went and I found it and I watched it. And I think he hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, he did.
I think he absolutely 100% nailed it
Wasn't it
in
well
that
done?
it was very well done, and
Yeah.
it was done in language that wasn't condescending, but it was easy to understand and with, pretty dramatic metaphors and visual aids that backed up his case. And I agree with his conclusions 100%. I believe you and I have talked about those conclusions before, but none of us could put it as succinctly as he did. So, what I'm going to do, I wanted to talk to you about it first before I just arbitrarily went and did it. I'm going to link that over on the Trampled Underfoot podcast Facebook page. Because if you are a student of music at all, even a pedestrian listener who just can't understand why people aren't as emotionally invested in music as we were when we were growing up, this will explain it better than I ever could. So I'm going to link it over on the Trampled Underfoot podcast Facebook page. Do check it out. It's not a long video, it's about 12 minutes long. But his conclusions, I mean, it was just a brilliant conclusion on his part.
Yeah, because he's within our sphere of timeline too. So, and it was
Mhm.
reasonable, but I'm saying that he's part of that era, decades era of
Mhm.
that he would know those, and that's why we would agree with him.
Yeah. But everything he said, I mean, I kept looking, you know me, I watched stuff like that with a jaundiced eye and quite a bit of skepticism.
Hmm.
I couldn't argue with a single conclusion. I could not argue with where he was going with it, where he went with it, and the conclusions he came to. I can't argue with a single one. So it
Maybe even
it's well worth a watch. The video is called "The Real Reason Why Music is Getting Worse," and as soon as we're finished live, I'll go ahead and I'll put that on our Facebook page, which Steve has graciously linked over here in the chat, and there's a link in the description. But if you're not following us on Facebook, number one, why? Number two, do so at this time, please. And number three, watch out later on this evening. I'll link that. So, but you were talking about that sense of nostalgia a little bit and that little bit of kind of obsolescence that we have in the language. It was Saturday. Yeah, Saturday. Was listening to Kim Commando as I do on the radio.
say that again. Who?
I was listening to Kim Commando on the radio.
Okay, I don't know who that is, but okay.
She's computer slash technology guru, been on the radio for years now,
Okay.
since before the internet explosion took place, when the computer age was just coming up. And
In your area?
no, nationwide.
Oh, okay.
So
I've never heard.
she's on like 500 radio stations or what have you. It's a good show about technology. And she likes to throw in these little fillers in between segments where she will start just talking about things, most of them technology related. And she came up with a couple of phrases, a couple of things we just don't say anymore that were commonplace just a few years ago, but we just don't say them anymore. Like, did you drop off the film to get developed?
Did you drop off the phone? Let me raise my volume. Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
Did you drop off the film to get developed?
Okay.
We just don't say that anymore. Or where's the payphone? Where's the closest payphone?
You don't use the word payphone anymore at all.
Yeah. And so that got me to thinking, yeah, there are quite a few phrases like that that we just don't use anymore. But then that got me to thinking about, well, there are a bunch of antique, obsolete, arcane phrases that are they're just obsolete. They have no modern day context, but we still use them. But I don't think people understand why. I don't understand why we still use them because they just don't make any sense. Like, you've shot videos for YouTube. I do it. But we still say, well, I taped this video when there hasn't been tape involved in, oh God, how many years now? Or let me get some of this footage. What do you mean footage? You're not, it's all digital. There is no footage. You're not taking feet of film or tape or anything like that anymore. Why do we still keep using that? Is it just habit?
Hmm.
You think so? You think that's what it is?
Well, no, I think that for us it's habit
Mm-hmm.
because that's what those words referred to in context when we were coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And we just tagged it along as the era continued. But for new kids,
Mm-hmm.
they heard it from our generations and incorporated it with the meanings that we had, even though the technology of the day today
Mm-hmm.
long ago changed that specific thing. So the language maintains certain things because they mean something specific,
Mm-hmm.
but they have secondary definitions or uses that are solid and or that take the place of a correct, like if you say
Yeah.
film footage, or a film reel or tape or
Mm-hmm.
um, today, um, you're just the same concept is behind it. You get
Right.
what I'm saying?
I do get what you're saying. I'm just wondering why we still use obsolete words when there are other words that could be used.
Well,
You know,
because we're
it's just as legitimate to say, well, we're recording a video because that's what we're doing. But when you say, oh, you could say, well, I'm shooting some video, or damn it, I lost all that footage. Well, there was no footage to lose. If you said I lost that recording, or I'm recording a video instead of I'm taping a video, it's just kind of weird to me that we will still keep using that. Or you'll say, um, hang up the phone, I want to talk to you. Well, there is no hanging up. You're just pushing a button.
well,
You're not putting, the phone receiver down on the hook on the wall phone to hang
yeah,
it up anymore.
yeah. The official literal saying is that you're hanging it up
Yeah,
or leaving it un un. What was the other one when you left it un? It wasn't left it
off
unhung.
the hook.
Off
Off
the
the hook.
hook.
Yep.
You don't say those things are literal to
Hmm.
what they were for the first half of the 20th century, or actually for all the 20th century, um, which we all participated in. Well, at least the middle to later half and whatnot. Um, and today, people will understand it for the most part because it has the idea that you're
Hmm.
going to shut the conversation down, terminate the conversation, and it's the natural course of language where a word,
Hmm.
it's the same thing that you and I confront or come across with the one that I like a lot, which is my use of the word argument,
Hmm.
and and your use of the word argument. Um, they mean those two different things that we talked about
Right.
in the past,
Hmm.
putting forth, points of views, this, and that, and
Hmm.
you know, or it could
Or
mean that we're having
hostility is involved. Yeah.
a bout of, yeah, a
Hmm.
confrontation. Um,
Well, off the hook is one of those too. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, no, just that the word argument. Look, I'm gonna have. Let me make this argument with you, Mark. Let's say
Hmm.
I say, well, now we know that we're using two different, or that we prefer two different leanings of that word.
Yeah.
You know now that there's the two, or we probably always knew. The point is that there's one that we use for it
Hmm.
instead of another word that would
Yeah.
confuse us. If you multiply a lot of words together that mean slightly different things for you and me,
Yeah.
that are both correct in our usage, but it's a
Hmm.
personal decision on which one, why we're using it,
Exactly.
we could end up completely confusing what the gist of our thing is. Um, but in general, and so that's true in most conversations. When somebody's telling you something, um, they're using the words in English that you and I both understand. But the problem with, if they're saying something complicated,
Hmm.
if they're
And
trying to, and if they're trying to convey something, well, let me just get this thought across because I will lose this one. If they're trying to convey something complicated as opposed to simple, and there's enough words involved in it, even though we think we got the gist of what the person is saying, there's a huge chance that the person is not saying what we think they're saying
uh-huh.
in its totality,
Right.
sufficient enough that we will take a different route as to what they're trying to convey to us.
That's why you got to ask questions for clarity, because you're absolutely right. If you say the word argument, to you it means the same as debate or discussion, but I may take it as another meaning, in that hostility is involved and maybe
Mhm,
anger is involved as well,
mhm.
when there is none. So,
Right. And
you,
that's a big one.
but that's why you have to clarify. You have to ask questions, and you wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. What do you mean by argument? I don't think we're arguing here. We're discussing, but I don't think we're. Well, you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Off the hook is one of those phrases that has more than one meaning. Because, for instance, well, we thought we were going to have to host Christmas this year, but thankfully my daughter said, no, we're going to do it at my house. So we're off the hook for that. Meaning we got out of a difficult situation.
But it kind of means the same thing.
But it also could mean that party was off the hook, man.
Well, that's a little bit more modern, but that,
But it's dual
yeah, there's,
meanings right there.
yeah,
So if
there's
you
multiple.
say that guy's off the hook, do you mean he just got out of a difficult situation,
Yeah.
or that he's real extreme and kind of crazy?
But now,
So,
your holiday season off the hook
mhm,
example, where did that originate? To me, I'll just say, it kind of sounds like it's the same concept that you're on the hook
mhm,
if you have to
exactly.
do the thing, and you're
Mhm.
off the hook
Right.
if you don't have to do the party. So I
Exactly.
think it has something to do with the usage of the original off the hook, or of the phone. I think there's a connection there that it just evolved into a saying that's
Well,
derived from it.
exactly. So, in fact, if you look it up in the dictionary, it'll the what is this, Cambridge dictionary? If a telephone is off the hook, it's not been put back correctly, so it will not ring. Is what that means. But if you are off the hook, you have escaped from a difficult situation. Informally, it also means to be extremely good. And the examples they give, that party was off the hook, or our next series is going to be off the hook.
Wait
So,
a second, but off the hook is also inform. If you use it in terms of that you're free from that situation of the party,
mhm,
that's still informal.
it is informal, but it's more common usage, is what they're saying.
But you wouldn't write if you were writing a litigious logisticious. What's the how would you say it?
I
Legit.
don't know the meaning you're trying to convey, so I don't know which word you're after.
And so even that's a good example that I'm trying to push out a word that I can't get through, and
Mhm.
I'm asking you to solve it for me. But how could you if you don't even know the word that I'm trying to get through? Let's skip that one. But
My magnifying glass ain't big enough for that one, homeboy.
well, no, it's but that's a good thing there. But if you were to write something out
Mhm.
and you wanted to be formal,
Yeah,
you
you
wouldn't.
wouldn't use either one of those phrases.
Right. You would say, I don't know, something to the effect of, and I was released from that prior engagement due to,
Mhm.
and you would do it some other way if you
Yes.
wanted to be really. You wouldn't
Mhm.
write a letter to your boss and say, "Hey, look, I'm off the hook with that one." You wouldn't do something like that. Let's say,
No. Yeah,
so,
exactly.
yeah, so that
But
was an interesting one. The off the
but
hook.
think about that. That's another one that is archaic. Writing a letter to. Can you tell me the last time you wrote a letter to anybody? That's what you were trying to get,
Yeah,
litigious? Okay.
yeah.
Can you tell me the last time you wrote a letter to anybody? I don't mean an email. I mean, dear X and X, so and so. And you longhand wrote out a letter, folded it up, put an envelope, stuck a stamp on it, sent it.
I can't remember.
I want to say 2006, maybe 2007. I wrote a letter to my grandmother because she loved to get letters like that. You could talk on the phone all day long, but a letter meant something to her. It's kind of like that thing we were talking about before. Which would you rather get, a birthday card or a birthday text? You know, the
A
card
birthday.
means at least you were thinking about me.
How about a birthday signal, like a meme,
Yeah.
a birthday meme?
Oh, I send those all the time on Facebook, but yeah, so that was kind of a strange one here. Was off the hook, and it's funny that you mentioned it because I had that pulled up as an example of one of these um, um, obsolete phrases that we do still kind of use. I mean, there are a lot of obsolete phrases that we still use, but some of them are not that old, and they've already become obsolete. We will still say click a link because we're used to using a mouse when most of the world doesn't even have a computer anymore and they're just on the phone and they're not clicking anything, they're pressing a button. So to click something is still a little bit obsolete, but we'll still use it. But it still doesn't have any meaning to it,
Can we
you
reverse
know.
it?
Uh,
Can we reverse the saying? So, like for instance, what would you have done?
mhm.
Oh, actually, you know what? I'm wrong, but I'm gonna tell you what I was gonna tell you, and then you tell me if
Okay.
I think I'm wrong. I think I'm quite wrong, but let me tell you. Let's see what this does. So go back to 1984, 86, whatever.
Hmm.
I was going to tell you. Well, Mark, let's do this in reverse. Like people today, they don't know the original meaning of why the heck we're saying. Well, what if it were in reverse and somebody back then in 86 or whatnot said to you, sorry, Mark, I butt dialed you.
Yeah.
Um, and that's another one, the dialing. Well, you could still say dialing, but here's the bit. Back in 86, a butt dial was still, I mean, I don't know this for sure because I can't remember now, but we could easily have sat on a phone and it clicked that automatic redial one number and whatnot, and it would have happened. I don't know if it existed back then or not.
In the 90s it did, but in the 80s I think it was, I don't, it may have come in like 89, but I don't think so. I think it was like the mid 90s, early to mid 90s. But even then you had to, if you hit the redial button it would dial the last number you called, but the receiver had to be lifted. It wouldn't do anything if the receiver was still on the hook.
But you had those phones with the antennas that were really fancy at one time
Oh,
in
the
the
brick,
80s.
yeah.
Well, they had the ones for the home,
Hmm.
that were uh, remote,
Hmm.
wireless, let's say.
Yeah.
You had your station on the wall, and you could take it around the house, and that was like one of the biggest things. Like if you had that phone, at least for us, because everything was always freaking connected to a wire at
Uh-huh.
my house.
Yeah.
And then finally we got one of those that you could just take around the house, and for some reason, even that little bit compared to now, felt like, man, we're freaking. Do you remember? Man, we're
Dude, I
freaking.
still have one. We have a home phone, we have a landline, and we have cordless handsets all over this house.
You're still in the 80s.
We have four cordless handsets. There's one in that bed. No, yes, there's
You're
one
Marty
in
McFly now.
the far bedroom where we sleep. There's one in her yarn room across the hall from me now. There's one near her chair in the living room, and there's one in the kitchen.
Get out of the 80s, folks.
I mean,
Get out of the
the
80s. Get
only
yourself.
people that have that number are family and people we don't want texting us because it's a landline. It doesn't accept text messages.
Well, back then, before that kind of thing was commonplace and
Uh,
Sears started carrying them,
yeah.
remember the selections at Sears? And they had those couple of ones that were like the phone selection section.
Dude, I remember when they weren't allowed to sell phones. You had to get it from the phone company, and you had your choice of black or black.
No,
That was
no,
it.
but okay, but do you remember? I mean, for a long time, but sometime
Hmm.
in the 80s, I remember
Hmm.
easily going up to the second floor at Sears
Uh huh.
or any of the major anchor stores at any given mall. Oh,
Uh
can you
huh.
say we have a landline, three cordless handsets for it?
So
Um,
me and Jim, we're both, we're back in the Stone Age.
you're all antiques. But I remember back then we'd go up to the second floor and
Hmm.
they'd have this aisle in the middle of, like, you had your
Hmm.
TVs against the wall.
Yeah.
Then
And
you
they
had
had,
all your sorts of different radios and Walkmans and such at one point in time across the 80s. And then you had your section of phones.
hmm.
And in that section of phones at that point in time, for a long time, but I'm just saying in that thereabouts era,
Hmm.
you would see phones from previous eras, the standard coily
Yeah.
coil,
Hmm.
whatever, and then you'd see phones that were the upgrades, which were the ones that I'm talking about that actually had
Hmm.
those that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we never owned one
Right.
until we did eventually, and
Hmm.
at that point, just that simple, you don't have a wire to be connected to.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I
I'm
I I still thought it was high speed when I could pick up that cordless handset and walk around the house, go out on the front porch, and still be on the phone. I thought, man, this is cool.
Do
This
you
is great.
do you remember this, Mark? You pick up the phone and call a friend of yours, and your dad's having a discussion, a conversation, and he says, "Put down the phone," and you're like, "Oh
Yeah.
crap!" And you put it down. You're like, "Oh crap!" And you stay there frozen a little bit because you're like, "Oh crap!" You remember that?
You remember sitting on the kitchen floor with the handset in your hand from the
Yeah,
wall phone? Now,
yeah,
the desktop phones were black, and the ones that hung on the wall, you could have black or you could have kind of an almond color.
yeah. That bone
Yeah.
almond color.
Yeah. And then they came out with the slim line, or some people called them the princess phones, and they were the slimline things. But just saying that, dialing the phone, it hasn't been a dial for 50 years. It went push button years ago. We're talking the rotary dial phones that kids wouldn't know how to use now. They'd never get it right.
Yeah.
It hasn't been dial the phone since then. We're just pushing buttons.
Back in the 80s, I hate to say it because that's the era that was really meaningful. They were, I guess, all meaningful, but the 80s was super special for me. And what can I tell you? It was really because afterwards things went
Mhm.
south very quickly, and it's been such. There's been great time, but the point is that the 80s was a very special time for many reasons. For me, um, and I didn't know it when it was happening, by the way,
No, we never do.
and nor did I know it a decade afterwards. It wasn't
Yeah.
only until I started rolling into 2000
Until you
that I
got
started.
old. Same as me. It was when you got old, you went, damn.
Is that what it is? Okay,
Yes, because you're right now, you're about 5 years from get off my lawn.
I'm already get off my lawn. Okay, so I'll tell you this. Um, in that era,
Mhm.
there was a lot of, and I don't know if people see it like this or not, but I do see it like this.
Mhm.
Um, there was, bear with me with this, and then you can tell me if it's
Mhm.
true or not, or do you see it slightly or maybe not.
Mhm.
In a way, the 80s appeared to me to be a regress in style and in colors with a little bit more exaggeration, but of the 50s and 60s.
Um, a little bit of 50s in there, a little bit of 50s, but you have to remember that the three biggest shows on TV at the time were set back in the 50s or early 60s. We're talking Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. They were the two biggest sitcoms, and then there was one other show. Oh my God, I'm hard
No, but
pressed
wait
now
a
to remember
second.
what it was.
Was Laverne and Shirley not modern time?
No, they were set in the 50s.
See, to me, it felt okay. Go ahead,
But
Schneider.
so that was kind of in style, that whole 50s flashback thing. Then the movie American Graffiti and all that other good stuff. So 50s nostalgia was kind of in vogue at the time. So yeah, there was kind of a regression into that kind of a style for a while.
I just saw it
Yeah.
in the girl's hair,
Yeah.
although it was slightly different, but there was something
Mhm.
about it. I saw it in the colors,
Yep.
where you had vibrant, even neon colors starting to pop up. Whereas, so in the 50s, I don't know how to say it, at least in culture, looking back, there seemed to be a little bit of that expression in the rock and roll culture of the time with socks that were quite, um, you know,
Hmm.
maybe pink, let's say, and stuff like that. They were different eras, obviously, but I'm
Hmm.
saying there was a sense of that. Anyways, within that world of the 80s, there were these phones, to get it back on track with the phones,
Yeah.
that were just the bee's knees.
Hmm.
Um,
Bright neon colors.
there were that, but there was one that I'm specifically thinking of, and let's see if you have a memory of that or that it
Okay.
pops in your head. It was plastic, transparent, and you could see all the junk inside of it.
Yes, I do. I remember it. I
I thought
remember a
that
couple of them.
that was just wild to
They
me.
were clear or they were tinted like red or blue or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that was wild. I don't
Hmm.
think that I ever had one that I can recall,
No.
but I did have a Elvis my aunt got me an Elvis Presley phone, and the Elvis Presley phone
Hmm.
was a statue of Elvis, like a character
Hmm.
or Elvis Presley holding a microphone from the 50s.
Hmm.
And when you press a button, he danced, ain't nothing but a hound dog, and then he stopped. And it had its bass and everything. And I really loved that it had the clothing and the whole thing. It was great.
When the phone company actually started selling telephones, they decided, "Oh, we need to get rid of this thing with the just all black handsets, or maybe three or four colors, but everybody had the same looking phone." You could buy a phone, and you went down to the phone center store, it was called, and it was still the phone company, but you bought a phone. You could have the old candlestick type, with the thing you stuck up to your ear and talked into down here, or you could get the old French provincial that had the big old ornate brass handset with the bone handle, and you turned the little cup up towards you, and talked into it. Those things were so damned expensive, though. There was one that my ex-wife wanted so bad she could taste it. It was about a 2 foot tall Mickey Mouse, and his arm was up like this, and he was holding the phone out. And when you got a call, you would take the handset out of his hand, and his arm would come forward. And then when you put it back on the receiver, you kind of pushed it back and hung it up. That thing back then, we're talking about 78 or 79. That thing back then was $150. And I was bringing home about $90 a week. So it was outrageously expensive to me. My rent was for a one bedroom house. My rent was $125 a month. That thing was more expensive than my rent for a month. No, we can't afford that thing. Hell no. I don't know if she ever got one, but she didn't have one while we were married because that was just way too much money. Then suddenly licensing changed, and every electronics company started making phones.
It got
Then,
wild.
yeah, I mean, towards the end there, before cell phones overtook landlines, you could go down to Walmart and get a phone for $10. They just weren't that big of a deal anymore.
Give me one moment.
Okay. All right. Let's go look at a few things here. Steve says he still has a landline. Hang in there, ma'am. I'm with you. Um, Jim, I remember remembering phone numbers. Yeah. It's funny you say that. My grandparents had the same phone number my entire life, obviously before my life, but they had the same phone number and it's still up here. I can still remember that ding dong phone number. I haven't called it since she passed away in 2018, but it's right there. Um, do you remember phone numbers from your childhood? You know, there's all kinds of goofy things like that. I remember addresses and phone numbers from my childhood. It's just one of those things that were drilled into you when you're young. Let's see. Linda says, I had an 80s brick phone when I was still in the National Guard. No way I could butt dial that monster. It was the size and shape of an actual brick. Yeah. And the buttons were kind of recessed into a little curve, kind of a doodad. And um, Jim says, I remember making person to person long distance calls, asking for myself so the person at the other end knew I had arrived at my destination safely. Yes. Um, I also remember making collect calls where you're at a payphone and you didn't have a dime to put into the payphone, and you would dial the operator, then the number, and the operator would come on and say, yes, a collect call. My name is Mark. And then whoever would pay the quarter or the 10 cents for the phone call. So, and
Sweetwater still has one payphone. It
yeah,
doesn't work, but it's sitting
yeah,
on the corner.
yeah. Um, that's another one there. There are other phrases that are related to the phone, like, well, it's your dime. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Or to drop the dime on somebody. Meant to actually, back in the day, you put a dime in the payphone and you reported somebody to police. So, man, he dropped the dime on me. What? And eventually it turned into somebody just told on you or something like that.
And each of those payphones had um like this very strong wired with the
Oh, yeah, with the stainless steel wrapper around it. Yeah.
yeah, and the phone book attached to it, and had a plastic cover on the outside and the phone book pages
Mm-hmm.
on the inside, and you could just pull and look from there.
Pull it
So
out, whip it up, and flip it open. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
there was a whole system involved with that.
Yep.
Those are things that are just simply, but again, we have discussed before that in that world that we
Mm-hmm.
lived in, although we don't have all the goodies that we have now in terms of like the tech and ease of use and such,
Mm-hmm.
but in that world, if some sort of catastrophe occurred,
Mm-hmm.
we still had the ability to use all those things to one degree or the next. And if now the internet itself gets screwed,
Yeah.
um, all our stuff will be unavailable to me, to us, to me. You know why I said me? Because I'm thinking of myself. If this, I mean, it's for everybody. But I was thinking to myself, um, if it
Yeah.
went down, I'm
Mm-hmm.
literally disconnected because I'm
Well,
actually. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But think of something else. For instance, now you're using a computer, I'm using a computer. We're kind of dinosaurs in that regard, in that we both have desktop computers that we're using. But what if the computer goes down? Your internet's fine, but what if your computer just suddenly fries one day?
It has. I've had that happen in the past.
Yeah,
You're automatically thrown into the Stone Age from one
yeah.
moment to the next,
Mhm.
and then you sit. I've had. Go ahead.
Then we're back in the 80s, and it's like, what the hell did we do back then?
Well, once that's gone, um, the times that has occurred, the various times it's occurred, to me, you look around and you see to yourself, even though you're here
Hmm.
and all the things around you have still been here, but because the computer, it's a suck into the thing. You
Your
get
whole
sucked in.
life is there.
Right. So what happens is that, or what I've thought is that I look around and I'm like, oh crap, there's like stuff all around. Yeah, I could do some other stuff, and I end up doing some other stuff, and you realize that there's something to be said about the attachment that we have.
Mhm.
I use it for my purposes. You use it for yours. Um, I can literally, and I know I've said this a million times, we have, but the ability to have access instantaneously to whatever your brain can think of. Um, I mean, there's no equivalent to that. The internet is a game changer since I would say the late 90s, but really in the era that we're living within the last 10, 20 years, it's a game changer, man. We're somewhere else.
Yeah.
We're somewhere
But
else.
we have become so dependent on it. Like, I'm not trying to scare you here, but think about all your genealogy research. All of the research you have done is on that computer. So if it goes down today, you're basically hosed unless you've got a backup offline somewhere.
Well, I mean, I, I, I wrote a book
That's
a,
true.
that's a directory, and I uploaded it to Google, and I uploaded it to the Internet Archives,
Right.
and I have it in a separate hard drive.
But
Um,
like today, the stuff that you get today, any updates that comes in today, if you haven't backed that up somewhere else, that's gone.
well, yeah. All I'm saying is that for the contingencies, all that I've done
Hmm.
is that I just told you, and then I
Hmm.
have my tree on
Right.
various sites. So I have it on WikiTree, I
Hmm.
have it on the Mormon site,
Hmm.
and I have it on
Right.
Ancestry and Heritage and so on. So it's spread throughout. Now, do I have all the new stuff that I've? Because my main go-to is Ancestry.
Hmm.
That's where I work. It's more comfortable for
Right.
me. So I have way more information there. But my main tree
Hmm.
is everywhere.
Yeah.
As far as the branches,
Right. Understood.
yeah. So
But that just goes to show how dependent we are on the computer. Because if
mhm.
the internet infrastructure should go down for some reason, which is, I won't say it's virtually impossible, but the whole purpose of the internet was to put information in a multitude of other locations so that one single location couldn't be hit and the whole thing taken down. So um, but we personally are dependent. Like, I'll give you an example. I bought this new computer, got it set up, everything's great. The computer that used to be here got migrated back to the other room, and I use that one in that room when I'm not in here. That old computer is sitting right behind me on the floor now. One thing I did not do before I disconnected that computer was take all of my music and iTunes off of that computer and put it onto the computer that replaced it. So now, if I want to get to my music, it's all on the computer that's disconnected and sitting behind me on the floor.
I have the same problem. I have stuff that I need access to, but it's in that same situation, and
Right.
I need to. find a way to, at some point, extract. I've got a lot of stuff that, but as far as the your example with the tree thing, and my reply, which is that I gave you
Yeah.
as best as I can do.
Hmm.
I did a book. Sure, I didn't print it, so it's not
Right.
in concrete,
Hmm.
but it's a PDF thing. It's out there in two different formats, in two different sites. And then I have the various trees on their particular sites, and
Hmm.
they save that stuff in their, so it'll be there,
Uh-huh.
and then I have it in my computer, and then I have a backup. But that's multiple places, but it's still,
Reliant on the computer.
well, no, not real. Well, relying on the computer, but let's say my computer goes, knock on wood, um, and I did that literally. But even like, let's say the computer, it's still on the internet. But if the internet goes,
Hmm.
that's all digital, so that's gone.
Yeah.
Unless they have it stored in their localized, which they would,
Hmm.
and then one day in the future, we have returned to civility, ladies and gentlemen. We are now back
Yeah.
online, and we shall slowly rebuild our society as it once was, and people would be
Yeah.
happy and cheering, and there would be dancing in the streets and
Yeah.
such. I could
But
imagine a world. Go ahead. Go ahead.
that just kind of highlights the dependence we have on this technology and how fleeting it can be, because if you forget to transfer something off of an old computer, or if an old computer dies and you can't get back into that drive, a whole lifetime's worth of work could be just gone in the blink of an eye because we didn't write it down. Al is here. Kilroy, Odessa Woodworking and Maker Shop. Howdy, Al. This is going to be near and dear to your heart. There are some things that we would now consider obsolete that even science fiction from the past didn't anticipate. For instance, Al is a major Star Trek fan. But next time you're watching an episode, Al, keep your ear open for things that are obsolete to us. Like, for instance, there was one episode somebody was saying something about, I'm just catching up on some paperwork. Well, would they still have paperwork in that future? Or would they be doing it? Would they even be writing? Wouldn't they be using like a PDA or an iPad or something of that nature?
In what future
That
from
far in
there?
the future in Star Trek. But that was developed in the 60s and they couldn't anticipate that leap in technology. They could anticipate being able to say computer and have the computer listen and respond to voice commands, but they didn't anticipate the mundane things like writing on a piece of paper instead of whipping out a little digital device and typing it in here in a note and then save it. You know, it's just one of those weird little,
Well,
juxtapositions.
there was no reality, over, or there was no knowledge over the future, obviously. Um, and if you sit and watch it now,
Hmm.
even though it doesn't, well, number one, yes, it was made in the '60s, but number one, it's a science fiction thing,
Right.
and so, and it's set in that time, or it was
Hmm.
recorded or filmed in that time. Um, uh, so it kind of, it's dated to that era. But when you watch
Yes.
it, or when I watch it, I just simply, I don't even want to say suspend the disbelief. It's a given. You're
Right.
just watching it, and you become, and you go into that world, and
Right.
you just accept the world, and you're in there, and you're enjoying it for
Right.
what it is.
Right.
So it's kind of like those old creature features as well, or
Right.
you
But
just accept it for what it is.
you do accept it for what it is, but that's what I'm it, they they could envision a world where interstellar travel was possible, where a person standing on a specific platform and energizing could break you down to a molecular level and shoot you across space and time into another place and reassemble you there. on no receiver, just down on the surface of a planet you happen to be orbiting. They can envision a future of voice commanded robots, but they couldn't. And maybe it's just one of those details they didn't think was important, but they couldn't envision a future without pencils and paper where they had to write things down. It was just one of those weird little anachronisms that it didn't age well, because even today, I mean, we do still sign contracts, but you can electronically sign a contract. So you don't put pen to paper. You can now, that is a legal document.
At best, what we would do back in the day,
Hmm.
at least in my experience, was either the handwritten,
Hmm.
or you would pull out the typewriter and you would type
Yep.
something out.
Yep.
And the typewriter was an extension, removed from that pen and paper, because now you're
Right.
just putting pre typewriter, the
Right.
letters are set there prior to
Hmm.
you. um so there was that little advance, which had been with us for a very, very long time, but um it was still a step back, or distancing from pen to paper that you're talking about.
Right.
um and when computers were around, they made they were around for households, and my father was an early adopter. I honestly, I've told you this, didn't see any, like you're talking about people not seeing the pen and paper, like Star Trek, not seeing that future concept not being
Without pen and
necessary.
paper, yeah.
Well, me, just in the 80s, seeing my dad working on the computer, and I knew it was around. I mean, we went to school and there were
Yeah.
computers, but the usage wasn't as dynamic
Hmm.
or end user friendly
Hmm.
for everyday
Right.
things necessarily. Like,
Yeah.
you
It
could
was
do your,
still in its infancy. Yeah.
it was in its infancy, so you would sit and you'd see, oh, well, there's people that write their little recipes, and they'll
Hmm.
save their little recipes. And I would think to myself, equivalent to thinking that, well, you're saving it in that computer, but now you have to turn on the computer,
Hmm.
and then you have to go to that file, type in the command to get the little disk and whatnot, and this and that. In order to get that right, why don't you just write it on a notepad in the kitchen and you're done?
Yeah.
That was my thinking,
Hmm.
right?
And it was totally legit thinking too, because that's what we were used to. We didn't catch up with the technology until it became interesting to us.
Well, yeah,
Because I was the same way. Why would you ever sit down and type out a recipe in the computer? Because it's in the other room, it ain't in the kitchen. So now either you have to run back and forth and write stuff down so you only make one trip and take it back into the kitchen with you, or if you were lucky enough to have one of the dot matrix printers, or even a daisy wheel printer, you could print it out on paper. But once you've done that, why don't you just put it on a recipe card? It
yeah,
took longer to get it in and out of the computer than it did to write it down on a little 3x5 card and put it in a recipe box.
yeah. I just couldn't see. I mean, I knew we took classes of that. We were like the first people to take classes of that
Mm-hmm.
as kids, and they would put us in front of the computer, and the computer would have a predetermined series of um, questions that you would have to solve for.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, we could do that with the book. I would think, sure, we're going to computer class, and that's fun because it's not paper
Ooh,
and
it's
book, right?
futuristic. Yeah.
So we'd go into the computer class, and you'd have your own little seat at your own little desk
Yeah.
with a computer on it. But like the options, it felt like there was no options really. I mean, okay, fine, but what?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that lasted for a good 10, 15 years, and
Mm-hmm.
then the explosion occurred, or 10, 20 years, and forward into the freaking year 2000 and beyond, and now where we're at, and it's like it's a world apart. But I couldn't at the time, just like you were saying with the Star Trek, envision a use for. I mean, and we even had Star Trek back then.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I watched reruns of the original Star Trek, So I knew that computers were used for all these things, but it just felt like,
Yeah.
no, this is stuff that science. Yeah, my dad's using a computer, but I don't think that he's going to launch a space expedition
No.
anytime. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I didn't have the foresight to now
Well.
compound that
Mhm.
with all the other things that we couldn't even imagine that would take place 10 years in the future now.
Yeah.
We don't know.
No, we don't know where it's going to go from here. We have no way of knowing. We think we do based on the current trends. But trends have a way of coming and going just like everything else. And the trend that's happening today, I'm talking about AI. The enthusiasm for AI will one day die. And what's going to be the next big thing?
Well,
We have no way of knowing.
even
Mhm.
that assertion, that's even that assertion is unknowable. We
Yeah,
do not know
we don't know.
what that AI,
Mhm.
the way some people are talking about this AI in terms of benefits is one thing, but the way certain people are talking about this AI in terms of danger
Yeah.
is another thing.
Every form of technology we develop, somebody is going to try to use it for good and somebody's going to try to use it for evil.
Okay, granted, but I don't remember. Maybe you do remember, or you guys out there, because I personally don't remember. But I don't remember through the first leg of this computer revolution that we experienced back in the day,
Hmm.
talking 20 years ago, let's say.
Yeah.
I don't remember a time that anybody said anything in the danger area other than your kids are spending too much time in the computer and this and that. The same thing they
Well,
would say with TV. What
I,
we have
I,
now with AI go ahead, is a world
I
apart.
do remember those dangers. Do remember that's about the time people started getting real protective of their personal data because identity theft was becoming a thing. Used to be, if you somehow got a hold of my bank account information, the only thing you could do would be deposit money in my account because you're just not getting money out without a signature and identification. But now with wireless transfer, where you give me the correct information, I can deposit money into your account or I can invoice your account and get money. That was never possible before. Now it is.
Unless you were a
So
business.
we were told beware of your personal information,
Mhm.
guard your social security number with your life. We were never told not to carry our social security card in our wallet. I used to carry mine in my wallet all the time.
Yeah.
My social security number was on my driver's license. And then suddenly the state said, nope, that's gone. And they issued me a new license without my social security number on it and then shredded the old one. So that was never a concern before the internet. So I do remember those kind of dangers, and it still is legitimate. If you save like credit card numbers on your computer, it's vulnerable. It could be intercepted, it could be picked up.
Yeah. So
So,
so the fraud thing, but the comparison of back in the day, at some point all that you're saying started to happen because people were transacting more online, through their banks and such and this and that. But early on there wasn't much that at all, if you recall. That only happened later. People didn't just start buying off of homedepot.com
no,
when
no,
that's
and in some places that was still illegal.
well
Internet commerce was illegal.
so there was a time when these concerns, but what I'm saying is, in contrast to what they're suggesting about AI,
Mhm,
is a whole different level. Because this AI thing,
mhm.
the warnings about the AI is that the computer or the AI will start to decide
Yeah.
by calculation that certain people don't need certain things, or it'll start to calculate out, because what it does is it learns from humanity. But
Mhm.
humanity, and right now we don't have that problem because, I mean, Google is rolling it out, as you see when you type in a question
Hmm.
or you ask a question. It's using AI now,
Yeah,
but it's still not mainframed in and this and that. But when
yeah.
AI starts to communicate with AI,
It still needs input from you.
right? But when it becomes a thing that it becomes self, actualized in a
Hmm.
different way, however you might think that's possible or not, that's one of the dangers that they're suggesting. It could decide to cancel your stuff, right away in certain ways. It can be used by other people to do that because it's more advanced, taking humanity's good and bad.
Hmm.
It could either do it on its own or it can be used for it. Just a million, I mean, hell, well, I was gonna say, we don't even, they can even pretend to be someone that, they can even call someone up. The AI can. You pick up the phone and you think you're talking to your Aunt Betty,
Hmm.
and because they learned how Aunt Betty talks,
Hmm.
and they know Aunt Betty's whole thing, and they can convince you to, you know go in a course of action that
Hmm.
would be detrimental, and a million things like that. That's
Well,
one of the fears.
yeah, I get that. You're talking about basically automating every scam that's currently operating with people. But yes, you're absolutely right. On a personal note, that would be a fun phone call to get because my Aunt Betty passed away in 2015.
Oh, you had
My
an Aunt Betty?
Yeah, my mom's sister's name was Betty. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
but that just kind of makes it personal right there. Oh, hey, great talking to you from the grave, Aunt Betty. You died in 2015. How you making this call? That kind of thing. But your point is well taken, and I don't mean to make light of it.
No, it could be.
But
They would know, right? They would
but
know.
we are not to that point yet. There, our technology is still AI technology is still in its infancy. We have specific AIs that are so at specific things. It's getting better, but still, if you're listening to if you're watching a YouTube video, you can tell an AI voice instantly. You just have to listen to how they pronounce things, and they will screw up when punctuation is involved. If a sentence is supposed to have a period at the end of it, and if a sentence is supposed to have a period at the end of it, but somebody or something forgets to put a space for the next sentence, you will hear, he came in through the window, dot, his friend was right behind him. They read that period as a dot. The AI doesn't know that that's the end of the sentence. Or they will mispronounce words. Or they'll mispronounce numbers.
Yeah.
You can tell an AI voice. And when I come across those videos, I immediately block that channel. I want people. I don't want AIs. Thank you very much.
Well, I would say to that um, my thought is that you can tell
Mhm.
when you can tell,
Yeah.
but you can't tell what you can't perceive, distinguish from, and you don't know when that is, and that's one of the threats. So you're saying you can tell and you can show examples,
Hmm.
but I bet, at least as that I could produce examples, but it would have to be done in a way where you don't know that I'm trying to challenge, your
Right.
judgment on it. But
There's no doubt I have been fooled by AIs. There's no doubt because the potential is there. If it's a good AI and a good quality control on the behalf of the person reviewing it to post it,
yeah,
yes, they can correct those little errors and they can fix things.
yeah.
You know, so Yeah, I get what you're saying. There's no doubt in my mind that I have watched an AI generated
and just don't
video
know.
and just don't know it.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
That we don't. There's an AI thing, and we're probably using the wrong terminology because there's subcategories, but whatever.
sure.
We're saying it the way we could understand it. There's one where it's Donald Trump's voice,
Uh-huh.
and it's freaking hilarious. I've run across it. You probably have to. Maybe
I
not.
don't know.
Okay, well it's
I've
this.
never, not that I know.
Well, it's this. It's probably like a Mexican gentleman,
Hmm.
or a Chicano guy, and he's done a theme where his many videos are Trump speaking in Spanish
Hmm.
and talking about Mexican food. He's like, I like chalupas, and he uses Donald Trump, but he's going into the Spanish, and I like my sexy Latinas, and it's Donald Trump, and you watch it, and it's the funny thing for me about it is that I can imagine it's some Mexican guy, Chicano guy somewhere out in the United States, sitting in his room, and he's saying, "Man, this will be funny." So I'm
Hmm.
gonna do a whole thing, and he's talking about all the different food varieties in Mexico, and it's Donald Trump like ordering
Yeah,
and this. And that. It's just the audio, and he shows images of the different foods, and it's hilarious as
but
hell.
but you're talking about nothing that somebody like Rich Little or any other impressionist could have done. You know,
Right, because it's his voice with the gravel in his
yeah. So there are people that do impressions of other people all the time. So that can be entertaining. That can be fun.
no, it's AI. Like I'm saying, like
Understood.
it's probably a dude, Mexican heritage dude,
Hmm.
and he's saying, "Oh, this combination. Let's have
Hmm.
Trump talking about Mexican food, and he's gonna do it in Spanglish, and
Hmm.
let's crunch that all and create." So he's just created a
Yeah.
whole little world using the tools of AI, and it's funny. But what I'm saying is that the voice, um, I know it's fake or AI because I would not expect Trump to be saying the things he's saying in that video. But if he went cold turkey, if he went straight up just something that Trump would say,
Hmm.
um,
You might think it was actually him.
right, yeah, like you wouldn't. I
So
personally
yeah,
wouldn't.
yeah, I get it. I tell you how ridiculous the whole AI thing has become, especially on YouTube. There are entire channels that are nothing but AI. There are actually AI reaction videos out there now where you have an animated character down in one corner of the screen reacting to whatever the video is. The character is AI generated, the voice is AI. They can't even do their own reaction videos anymore. They're getting the AI to do it now.
So you're saying that an AI is reacting to an AI?
No, an AI is reacting to a YouTube video.
You know what would be cool if an AI video, YouTube video, were being reacted to from an AI.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Greg says, I know of a river in Thailand that has polished precious gemstones buried in the banks of it, and I can sell you a map to it, Eloy.
The good old days, not 3 to 4 weeks ago. Um,
Nah, it's
well,
been a couple years, but yeah.
well, yeah, that's human beings creating a video with the expectation of discovery,
Hmm.
of precious gems and stuff, and that's exciting. I mean, it's sort of like the scratch off ticket
Yeah.
videos and stuff, but they set it in motion. They
Dude,
pre-plan it.
I don't, I, I don't know. Maybe and this is why I'm not YouTube famous. I don't see the attraction of watching other people play slot machines, watching other people scratch off lottery tickets, and stuff like that. I don't get the attraction. But if you look at some of these channels, we're talking like 500,000 subscribers, 200,000 views on this video.
Yeah.
It's like, are you kidding me? People are actually watching other people scratch off lottery tickets. Wow. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Dude, there's people that eat bugs and they think it's great. Just
Well,
that, just that, just that alone.
dude,
Just that alone.
There are people that watch other people eat regular food. Mukbang. Look it up. Just look up that word, Mukbang. Somebody will come home with, uh, I don't know, one of those little styrofoam uh, to go. It's a carne asada plate.
Yeah.
And they just start eating. And 4 million subscribers, 800,000 views. Are you kidding me? So if I take this, I I ate them all. I was going to say, if I take this bag of Maltesers and just start munching one at a time, I might get 1 million views, but I can't. I already ate the Maltesers. Well, there
We
went
don't
my
we don't
chance at internet
we
fame and
don't
fortune.
know what we don't know what other people, with the billions of people on earth.
Hmm.
I know what a human is in my mind and what they would like in my mind from my perspective because it's me.
Yeah, yeah,
But the
true.
problem is that even though we're human,
I see. Yeah,
even though you're human and I'm human and everybody out here is human, unless they're AI,
yeah.
um, even though we know that we're human, it's very clear to me. It's been clear to me in the past couple of years. I didn't think much of it past the last couple of years that I can recall.
Hmm.
But the last couple of years, I've really started to hone in on this one concept that I repeat in my head, is that you may be talking to another human being, and you may be talking in the same language, and you may both require food for substance and water for
Hmm.
hydration, and you may require all these things. Sure enough, but you are not necessarily anywheres near in the same brain space of the things that motivate, the things
Right.
that entertain and
Hmm.
titillate or confuse and all this and stuff. We are not in the same place. Now we have reference points we can reach each other at.
Right.
We can reach each other at, and from there work at it. But
Hmm.
dude, it's like what I mentioned it to you another time. If I were to take the driver's seat in your head
Yeah.
and the way that you see the world,
Yeah.
even though you have reference points that I can relate to, I would be in an alien world.
You'd be lost. You'd be
Yeah,
lost because I have entirely different experiences and a whole different life from what you've experienced.
right. And things that reach your eyes and thoughts that
Hmm.
reach your brain have the similar processes
Right.
than any other human being, but your conclusions and the things that
Hmm.
and attachments to that,
And your
it's
emotions and everything else involved. Right.
yeah, the weight of life and its particulars.
Hmm.
So in reality, we're dealing with human beings that we're all the same at one level, organically speaking, but this mental space. That's why some people that are off the farm, let's say, or off the
Hmm.
that appear so to you or I, might very well be in the ways that we think that they are, or in many cases we just don't comprehend what's going on in their processes, in their we can agree that if a person is sitting on the side of the sidewalk and they're brushing their teeth and going good 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 good, and
Hmm.
that there's something in the direction of they're insane, we can agree to that roughly thereabout. But
Well, but the little earphone for listening to talking on your cell phone has made it harder to identify those people because they may be having a legitimate conversation with somebody on a cell phone somewhere. So you got to be careful with that. It's made it harder to identify the crazies. But there was a comedian, Dana Gould. Part of one of his stand-up routines was, we might think these people are crazy, but what if they're not? What if they're just on another dimensional level? Maybe for every little old man we see walking down the street going, no one tells a sailor when he's had enough to drink because only a sailor knows when he's had enough to drink. You think he's nuts, but what if there's a guy 100 miles away going, oh, shut up. You were never in the Navy. What are you talking about, sailors? You don't know anything about being a sailor. Maybe there's a conversation going on in another dimension that we're not privy to, you know?
yeah, we don't know. And also there's the word of crazy.
Hmm.
So the word crazy, like any other word, has a definition.
Sure,
I'm
but
sure we
it's
could look.
also subjective. But go for it.
Well, yeah, well, exactly. The Our judgment call on that is subjective, but there are some telltale signs
Mhm.
that within the possibility range of normal behavior to erratic
Mhm.
behavior of what's common in human beings on your day to day, that if you see someone exceeding that
Yeah.
threshold, then you're saying, then you use that term of crazy because it applies in that window of extremes. um but you saying that a person is crazy, they could have be having a
Well,
momentary situation. I mean,
it's
we don't know is what I'm
it's
saying.
also it's also just a snap decision that encapsulates your opinion.
Yeah, it's
You
not like
know,
you're sitting there
it's
and
subjective.
right,
You
you're
know,
not sitting there and analyzing the situation.
right?
um it's sufficient to make such a claim that's so
Well,
official. You're just saying it that, hey, this person is off their rockers. It could mean anything to the other person listening to you saying it.
hmm
From the general consensus that they're just nuts. There's
hmm
no thought beyond the fact that you just relayed that the person is nuts. The person that's hearing you say that is just saying, okay, he's nuts. But there's no thinking about what that means. They just accept that little scenario and move on to the next little jump in conclusions. And so everything we think is left in that little sort of space of, let's just jump to the next conclusion, jump to the next conclusion. And but the thing is, if you run across the person that will not participate in jumping to conclusions with you over any number of topics, then there's a situation that occurs where I've confronted that situation when I do that, and it can happen vice versa. We've done it here in certain
hmm
topics. I don't know, be it lizard people, whatever the number of things. Like if you really want to hone into something and it's a little bit off the cuff and stuff and this and that. Um, but general stuff, when a person says something that's obvious that everybody should just agree to, it's not obvious.
hmm
And when you run into human beings that will not participate in accepting an obvious, now the person, whoa, what? I
yeah.
just said they're nuts, man. I said, well, what do you mean about they're nuts? People don't want to go into the rigorous thing. Maybe they don't have time, like we've talked about before. But, um, well, there you have it, is what I'm saying. So we take for granted a lot of words that get tossed into the. We all do it. I do it
But
all the time.
oftentimes it's meant as a way of dismissing somebody so we can just get away. Oh, you think there are little green men up there on the moon watching us through telescopes? You're crazy. Have a nice day. Check, please. You know, I'm out
Yeah,
of here.
yeah. Well, the jumping to conclusion part as a base example is, I guess, can we lead that into what I wanted to mention earlier?
You can if you'd like.
Okay, so the jumping to the conclusion. I'm part of a group in on Facebook, and it's a Spanish group for DNA and such and this and that. They just released a new update on My Heritage, where they corrected um, all the new updates or estimates, and now all Spanish people are roughly almost 100% Spanish.
Mhm.
If you're Spanish, if you have native ancestry, or they'll give you some percentages and this and that. But
Yeah.
if you skew towards Spain,
hmm
you're looking at a whole lot. So my result turned out to be, now, I used to be more, but now it's saying I'm 70% Spain,
hmm
26% Portugal, and then there's like 3% Tunisia.
hmm
Now I'm Tunisian. I'm not, but
but
it's giving me. Go
just
ahead.
for clarity, these updates come not on a regular basis, but it's pretty common that these updates come in as they get more data, right?
They'll update it. So what happened? Yes, they'll do it.
But it's not like a once a month thing. It's not guaranteed it's going to come out once a month. It's just as they get more data, they get it collated, they release an update.
It's never updated once a month. It's
Yeah.
updated once every year, a few years. In this case,
Yeah.
every who knows how many years. It's
hmm
very, very, and they do it just for that,
hmm
to collate information.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing: this company, My Heritage,
Hmm.
It's a very good company.
Hmm.
People were never satisfied because everybody would prior just about got a percentage of Nigerian.
Hmm.
Talking about Nigerian princes. Everybody. If you're
Uh-huh.
British, you got a percent of Nigerian. If you're Spanish, you get a percent of Nigerian. If you're from anywhere in Europe, there was some percentages of Nigerian. Not everybody, but a truckload.
Hmm.
Um, and people don't like that. They didn't like that a lot. They didn't like that a lot. Um, and the critique was that they're not doing this right because people know their family trees,
They think they know their family trees.
and some people do, and some people don't,
Yeah.
and some people think they do, within that spectrum.
Hmm.
But the problem isn't that they think they know or they don't know or this is their family tree. The problem is that the DNA's results are estimates,
Hmm.
and the reason that they're estimates is that you can't. Okay, so like when somebody, this is going to be contentious, but if they say you're like 60% English,
Hmm.
okay, you even if they say that you're 60% English, you are not 100%. You're not 60% English. You
Hmm.
simply are not. You're English through your heritage,
Hmm.
but you're not or Spanish. Let's turn it to Spanish because it goes back on me. Yeah, you're 80% Spanish. Well, no, you're not, because DNA isn't there in your body inside of you as a little like sign on top that says Spanish and a percent. It doesn't work like that. This is just an estimate, and they've used the categories of countries to make it so that people understand what they're trying to convey in this interpretation of DNA. But
Hmm.
DNA doesn't say that. DNA overlaps, mixes along the letters between country borders.
Hmm.
So if you put me next to a British person, absolutely, and we would be virtually 100% the same. Virtually, well, we would be 99% the same. Within that remaining, there's variations they can pick out. But the problem is, since I have European ancestry, but the British person has European ancestry. Putting aside appearances, with the whole thing of appearances of the dark, and all this and that. Put that aside. Inside your under the hood, we're actually the same family. Hard concept for people to understand because people are British. I'm English, and
They're
those people,
going by nationality, not.
right? Because it's what we're used to. Well, anyways, but it doesn't work that way because it blends in. Well, these people, it happens to, so it's happening to the Spanish people. They're saying, well, now I'm 100% Spain. Well, or 80% or 70%, whatever. I'm 70 now. Plus now I'm 26% Portuguese. Plus that Tunisian. Those are my three things. That's it.
Hmm.
But that's not true. But I'm not fighting it because I understand it's an estimate. They can never get it right, ever, because DNA, the part that people will not understand because they don't want to understand it, they can't accept it. It's just not their paradigm, the paradigm they live under, and it crosses all populations across the world. There's a lot of people that just can't accept that everybody's related to each other. It just is. But now the Spanish category includes Spain, Catalan, and Basque.
Hmm.
That category
Hmm.
has sent the Spanish community in that group, because remember, Spanish people
Hmm.
are not, hey, yeah, I'm Spanish. No, it doesn't work that way. No, I'm Cantabrian.
Hmm.
My people are from Cantabria, and we're Cantabrian people. And those people are Catalan people. And the other people are from Andalusia. Those are Andalusian people. They don't look disparagingly on them, but they're saying those people over there, yeah, we fold into the Spain, but those people are from there, and
They
we're
have a
from over.
different culture. They have a bunch of different. There are differences.
Yeah, it's like a difference between one type of French people in the Pyrenees compared to French people up north. There's differences. They're all French,
Hmm.
but they have cultural variations.
Right.
They married into each other in those regions. Same thing in Spain. Well, anyways, or even in England, if you say to a person, "Oh, well, Scottish or English or
Cornwall or London or
yeah," are you trying to tell
Newcastle.
Are you trying to tell me that I have Irish? I'm English, man.
Yeah.
And it's stuff like that. People don't understand that. Well, anyways, so now they're pissed and they're saying this company is crap. I'm actually this, and the other person, no, I'm actually that. And then I come along and I wrote a reply that created such a freaking whirlwind of problems. I mean, people even started. Some person called me stupid. Um, and you know how I started the thing? The first thing you all have to understand, and I was doing it with good intentions, but maybe I didn't do it with the first thing that we should all understand. Bad decision. Is that we all originate in Africa.
Well, that was your first mistake.
And that started the thing. And then the other thing I said, gentlemen, the category of Spain does not genetically exist. And that phrase is an affront to to people that are Spanish that don't understand what I'm trying to say. I said genetically does not, because the category of Spain
Uh-huh.
is a man-made category.
Mm-hmm.
And DNA isn't saying, okay, guys, we're aligning now and we're all the little Spanish letters. No, there's no
Mm-hmm.
such thing. All those Spanish letters are English letters. And
Mm-hmm.
all those English letters that are actually Spanish letters are actually Cantonese letters. And all those Cantonese DNA letters are actually Native American. It's all the same crap.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't want to understand that. And here's the cliffer. The reason I say that and
Mm-hmm.
wrote that is because the freaking paperwork that these companies write, if you read it,
Mm-hmm.
all of the companies, they
Mm-hmm.
say that.
Mm-hmm.
They explain it. I'm not inventing it. I'm just reading the freaking literature.
Well, you're talking to people who, when they saw the license agreement, they didn't even bother to scroll down. They just clicked, yeah, agree, and then clicked install. So, yeah, I get it.
So here's the thing. So it's sort of like um not they weren't all being like, there were people that did like the post,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of them went there to write and they could not get over a paradigm that, because I also said that the I also said that the results were both correct and incorrect at the same time, and they laughed at me.
Mm-hmm.
Because you cannot go to a human being and throw the concept out that something is both correct and incorrect at the same time. Because the obvious thing for any human being is to say, you can't have something that exists that's correct, but at the same time simultaneously be incorrect. But I said it, and I
Mm-hmm.
said it in a confident way. I said, no, this is, we are, not only are these tests correct, they're incorrect at the same time. And the
Mm-hmm.
concept is unavailable to a lot of people. And it's
Yeah.
simply this, that an estimate is a probability. And that probability estimate is something that a company takes all the factors that they have available to them,
Mm-hmm.
they put it into a computer, they run your DNA through it, and according to the categories that they've predetermined, let's say all these letters of DNA, we're going to call these Spain letters because most people in Spain have that organization of letters going on. But all these British people have these letters occurring. There's overlap between the two, but in order to get a category called Britain or England or whatnot, and a category called Spain, they have to chop it. And the people that fall on one side or the other don't fall on one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
The people that fall on one side or the other fall on one side or the other. All the people fall on one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That
the
or
problem.
both. Exactly.
So people, but they have to make one category one thing, and another category the other.
Yeah.
What was that?
Schrodinger's ancestry. Yeah. You put the cat in the box, it's both dead and alive at the same time because you don't know until you open the box.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, so I explained that to them. They wouldn't take it, and it was they attacked.
Yeah.
Um um, and it's
That
very
guy just called me Nigerian.
Yeah, nobody liked that. But that was, even on the English sites. I'm also part of the English sites just because it's the language that, and
Mhm.
I may not have that answers, but um, they're all about the royalty thing that we've talked about
Yeah.
and discarding other. So everybody's totally into their stuff,
Hmm.
but they're disregarding what it actually all means.
Hmm.
Not everybody. There's plenty of people that do know what it means, but there's a lot
Yeah.
of people that don't know what the hell it means, and the literature says it, and so it was a big contentious. But now everybody is a lot of Spanish,
Hmm.
and there's no fixing it. And
Yeah.
I just found it incredible. I was in a fight.
Until the next step that comes along.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I can kind of sympathize with these people, a little bit. I can't agree with their methodology, but I can kind of sympathize with it a little bit as I'm standing there in a kilt with a sporran, my Prince Charlie jacket on, and I find out my ancestors before Scotland were from Belgium. And it's like, damn, you know?
Yeah, it kind of sucks because we have a pre um notion of, you know, what it is, but at the end of the day, if you think of it in terms of what they're explaining,
Mm,
it's less outrageous if you understand what they're saying, and
mm,
it's more soothing because yes, I have my identity too,
sure.
and I kind of like it,
Mm,
but they're explaining something different as to why, I mean, I'm not 26% Portuguese, but wait a second, I just said I'm not. How do I know that? Oh, because I look at my tree. Well, I do have Portuguese in my tree, but they weren't all Portuguese. In fact, most of them were not, but there were
right.
some.
But see, you inherited half of your DNA from your mother, the other half from your father, but you didn't inherit an even split of everything that made them up. So their results were probably different from yours.
Oh no, there would be. Their
Yeah.
results would be different than mine.
Hmm.
But even so, that aside,
Hmm.
the 50% that you're explaining, which is true,
Hmm.
is not correct once you do this. 25% of that 50 is English.
Hmm.
The other 25 of that 50 is Scottish.
Hmm.
Once you say that, once you introduce a name to bracket in what that
Uh-huh.
DNA is, you've introduced the error because the DNA that a British person compared to a Scottish person have separated from each other is so mixed.
Hmm.
You can't
Yes.
say this guy's British and that guy. In order to do that, you have to take all these Scottish people and
Yeah.
say, man, all these Scottish people have these certain snips that
Hmm.
point in this direction but the English don't have quite as many.
Yeah.
And then you force a break between the two.
Hmm.
You make one group the Scottish and you make the other group the English. But what ends up happening? The people that fall in between, in the middle, that
Yeah.
have a little bit of both, they may be completely English or completely Scottish terms of where they grew
Hmm.
up
And their culture, yeah.
and they may be one of the two.
Hmm.
But because they share in between, then they fall into one or the other. And if they
Hmm.
fall in the wrong one that they feel is the wrong one,
Yeah.
now you got a problem.
Yeah.
And so that's what's happening with the Spanish people now in this update. I don't know what's happening with the English. I have to go and
And
check.
you
But
had to and you had to turn up the heat and stir the pot a little bit. Turn it up a little bit, stir the pot a little bit. Actually, I
well,
think that's kind of funny.
I just
I mean,
wanted to alleviate
mhm,
the problem for
right.
sincerely and
I
say,
get
look,
it.
yeah, and say, look, guys, it's not such a cut and dry. I mean, honestly, they're giving you an estimate that's
Hmm.
pointing in a direction, but it's not like,
Yeah.
but they wouldn't have it.
No,
They wouldn't have it.
he just called me African.
Well,
I
that
don't
part
know,
some
man. I
people
get it.
understand. That part some
Yeah.
people understand that we originate in Africa. And
Mhm.
a guy said, "Oh well, if we start thinking that way, um, so the problem is this: people can't deal with Africa as an origin in the world of DNA, even though the DNA, like geneticists and this and that, and they say that that's what it is.
Mhm.
It's just what it is. We originate there, and then we spread out. Fine.
Mhm.
It's what it is as far as they know right now, and it seems like it's it's a mountain that seems unscalable as towards where it's pointing because
But
haplo.
even then, DNA technology is still pretty much in its infancy. It's not all that old. So they're still testing, they're still gathering information. So even with the update you just got, it's going to change as they get more and more and more information and more tests and more remains are discovered that they can test. So all of this that they got now is still pretty basic. It's still a relatively small sample.
No,
When
it's
you
not.
think of all of the billions of people who have lived over the eons,
Okay,
we've got a pretty small sample
okay.
for anybody to come to a conclusion like that,
Which
you
one?
know,
Which conclusion?
that these people are jumping to.
Okay, the Africa bit
Hmm.
is a tough mountain to climb.
Yeah.
In other words, there's virtually no there's virtually no escaping because all the DNA from you, any of our tests
Yeah. Goes back there. Yeah.
goes back there to people that they dug out from there, and so that means that we're related with those very old people, ancient people or whatever. So that's
Hmm.
a tough mountain to climb.
Right.
But people want to break from that mountain
Hmm.
because they don't want to be associated.
Because they don't. Yeah.
They don't want to be. So that's true. The part about little samples, honestly, there's more that can be found, always,
Oh, sure. Oh,
and
definitely.
they don't know today what they will know in the future. But as far as limited, um, what they know is pretty across the world solid. Like you can't argue with numbers. You can, but like if you find the same numbers in you, in the other guy, and the other guy, and the other
Well,
lady, and this and
no,
that,
no, no, no. What I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying here. I'm saying that proportionally speaking, based on the number of people who have lived, the number of people who have been sampled and tested,
living today,
what living today or remains they have found that can be tested, that have DNA in them that gives them a result. The proportion of people, the percentage of people who have been tested versus the percentage of people who have lived is relatively small. Let's say that they have 100 million samples that they have tested now. Out of the billions of people who have existed on this earth since the first Homo sapiens, the percentage is pretty small. That's what I'm saying. And it is so small that these people who are making these snap determinations really can't make those determinations simply because we don't know yet. There's still information coming in. That's why these updates come. That's why these numbers change.
I'll just suggest this one very important bit here, that even though it's true that it's completely true that most people that have lived on Earth, we have no
Yeah.
sampling from them, and in fact, most people that are alive today, we don't have
Right.
any sampling from them. It's only a small um, chunk of humanity that
Right.
has to. And by the way, the majority of people that have taken tests are in the British Isles and the United States.
Hmm.
There's, they have numbers out there, so most of it is slanted towards British Isles because the people in the United States are very interested in that,
Yes.
and there's people, but other countries are not so.
Yeah.
Like I told you about my long distance cousin in Spain, and he says, "Why do I need to take a test? It sounds useless. I know where my parents, grandparents, great grandparents,
Yeah.
great and they were
And,
right from this village."
and that's
Yeah,
where it ends to a lot of people because they're
yeah.
just not interested in going back further. And I understand that. I really
They
do.
know where they were from, so why? But in Americans, we
Hmm.
have the history of the travel over from
Hmm.
over there.
Hmm.
But what I wanted to say is that even though it's true that most people have not been tested dead or
Hmm.
living, um, that when you go back in time, there were fewer people back in time. So the samples that they do have today, basically, they can tell all the things that they can tell, but what they can't tell, let me see how I can say it. Last thing I'll say, but let me say it like this. This is the last thing I'll say, but on this thing, but let me say it like this. I'll use a Spanish person because I'm
Okay.
studying that. When they give you Spanish as a result,
Hmm.
what these people are missing in the understanding is that the category of Spanish was put there to contain the result so that people could understand it in a geopolitical cultural way that, oh, this person, go ahead.
Results from that particular region,
They're
correct?
calling it, yeah, well, yeah, they're calling
They've
it Spain.
called it Spain because that's a border we can recognize on a map.
Yeah, so we
Right.
understand it as regular people that,
Right.
oh, okay, Spain, yeah, I understand it's Spain.
Hmm.
But what they don't do, or I'm sorry, yeah, what they don't do is that
Hmm.
that category of other companies do, but what they don't do is that that category of Spain that they give you, like let's say they gave you
Hmm.
80% Spain, okay, now I'm 80% Spain. You're really not. And this is why you're not. Because within that category of Spain, like a Russian, you know those dolls, Russian dolls that
Yeah. Yeah.
collapse into each other?
Matryoshkas. Yeah.
Just like a Russian doll, that main category of Spain that they decided on due to the geographic region,
Hmm.
under that, you have Celts or
Hmm.
Celt Iberian.
Hmm.
Those were a real people group that we actually literally come from,
Hmm.
unbeknownst to Iberian, which were an indigenous group of people that actually just were always there.
Hmm.
Phoenicians, that were people from out towards the Middle East that came a long time ago.
Hmm.
Greeks that came and populated. Romans that came in and populated. Then came in people from Central Europe a couple of times,
Hmm.
and created and it kept on swooshing around and swooshing.
Evolving.
So,
Exactly.
so if you were going to say, so within that cat, and then, so you see what I'm saying? So Spain, you could break it down into subcategories, but here's the thing. After the fact, people were marrying. Let's say you went to Cuba and you married, like my grandfather married my grandmother, who happened to have half Italian and half um, Cuban.
Hmm.
I don't know how long her Cuban side was on the island. It was likely Spanish and likely Canary Islands, but I don't know because that one line is. But the point is that now you have a mixture,
Hmm.
and but you had mixture from the beginning.
Yeah.
You could do the same thing for the British Isles or anybody,
Yeah.
but they have their own different little mixtures going on. Well, people don't understand that and they don't accept it,
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
but it's there. So the
Be-
tests can reveal that,
mhm.
but they don't give you all that. What
Well,
was it?
Greg says, and that's why genetic history means zip or nada to me. It's cultural heritage that I take any notice of. Hair color, eye color, speech patterns, mannerisms, physical characteristic of which are somewhat genetic but are lost in a half a dozen generation. So I don't give a rotund rodent's rectum that genetics traces me back to be a Nigerian prince. Prince Greg.
Look at it this way. That viewpoint of yours is the way you've summed it up, and how you see fit, and it's completely reasonable to you. But there's people out there that, so my curiosity is my curiosity, but there's people out there that study these things for all sorts of reasons, that are into all sorts of different things like
Yeah.
archaeology, and then books are written with specific, like knowing what happened in Europe before written history.
Mhm.
And then there's people that are into that, and then there's people that are into reading about that,
Mhm.
um
But
and all that. So it just depends on where you sit on that. But people in North America are very interested, unlike Greg, in the genetic side of it. They are.
I can see Greg's point because, and I can somewhat agree with him on that. In that genetic history to, I think, most folks, at least that I know anyway, is less important than cultural history. Because if you, for instance, your dad often told you you're American, he's Cuban, because he was raised in that culture, which, even though his ancestors were from um, Cantabria, he saw himself as Cuban because he didn't grow up in Cantabria and didn't have experienced that culture. He experienced a separate Cuban culture that may have had a lot of similarities with Cantabria. So when I my ancestors, Scottish, English, and a couple of others, Italian, and a couple of others, Native American, I was raised by a mother from Texas who was raised in that Southern Scots Irish culture. That's the culture I know and understand. I have never lived in Scotland, so I can't really say I understand the car of the. I started reading Greg's answer or Greg's comment. I can say I'm of Scottish heritage, but because I've never lived there, I can't really understand the Scottish culture because I've not experienced it as a Scot growing up. So I can kind of see that it's the culture of my ancestors that means a little bit more than the genetics. But then again, we're all on our own journey. We're all on a different hunt.
Yeah, so I'll say this to that. So, I agree. And by the way, it's unknowable
Mm-hmm.
up until recently, within the last 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
that anything outside of what your family explained to you and
Mm-hmm.
that was documented um, down the line, you may have a great great grandfather that, and here's a picture, and there's a great story about him, and it's passed along, and so you have that little sort of like bookend of history. But what you don't have, actually, I'll say it this way: what actually in our case, we had, let's call it, an 1800s threshold
Mm-hmm.
of where we all came from, and we knew it was part of
Yeah.
Spain. But beyond that 1800s threshold, um, you couldn't, unless you got into it, and maybe then maybe you could find something, but you couldn't go beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
other than you're part of this larger group called the Spanish world
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, that if you were curious enough, you could go and read history books, and then you get an idea of the vast history, and you say, oh well, something back there, my ancestors would have been part of something back there.
Yeah.
But with what we got now, they can actually connect bones to you.
Yeah. There's a greater than 0% that they might be able to link you to that event,
Yeah, there's
to a person that it was involved in that event.
one of the things that they've been able to do is that they've been able to say, well, you have, there's an ancient site,
Mm-hmm.
and there's bones buried under this cathedral
Mm-hmm.
that archaeologists dug up. They called in the geneticists, because now we have tools in that area. They extracted the DNA from it, from the bones. They put it in a database that's free and open to everybody, and people that do that sort of thing across the world, universities and so on, will inspect that, and then they put it out for companies to use. Or
Mm-hmm.
you could use it if you're into it so much, you can do your own programming, and
Mm-hmm.
you can, if you're into that or have the capacity to do that, and you can find out whether you match with the person or not. But there's companies that offer, and if you match that person, now you know that you have a match there. But what does that mean? Does that now mean that I am from the palace of the this and that? It really doesn't, because another thing that they found is that your DNA that you have, mine, that I have, um, can be found in old bones all over the place
Yeah.
because of the and that's why I threw in the Africa thing, because that's the origin, the DNA. That's why
Hmm.
I linked it to that past. But that
Hmm.
past with that origin is contentious because of the slavery thing and the
Yeah.
racial thing, and that's why people don't kind of like it much, because it's associated with all these uh uh
Well,
and I understand that,
but
and I mean, but
well, some people are just. I'm sorry, it's going to sound kind of jerkish to of me to say, but some people are just going to have to get over it. You know.
sooner or
Yeah.
later, but that's the one thing. But you would not associate a proper person from somewhere in Northwest Europe, you know, uh, and now you get a DNA test and they throw in, you have Nigerian, let's say,
Hmm.
and you consider that very same cultural thing that Greg was
Hmm.
saying. If they throw that into you,
Hmm.
and you've been culturally brought up in a certain way, and you have certain ideas and this and that, neither here
You,
nor there in terms of like not aggressive or
well,
anything, but there's a negativity attached to it. What you're going to
well,
do is you're going to try to reject that in some cases.
well, the other thing that people are forgetting is that in all of this, any of these reports doesn't change who you are. You're still the same person, no matter what these DNA results say. You know,
It's changed me a lot.
it might say that I'm 20% Dodge Dart, but it doesn't make me a different person from who I was when I got out of bed this morning. I'm still the same guy with the same backaches, with the same list of things he's got to get done, with the same craving for a cookies and cream blizzard from Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
I'm still the same guy.
Well,
It it doesn't change who I am. So,
I'll say me, it
mhm,
has changed me in that um I didn't know a bunch of stuff.
mhm,
A lot of stuff was in your face, difficult,
mhm,
confusing, or unknown, let's say. And my curiosity was what led me in different little areas. It's not a secret because it's the information's out there for, I mean, anybody can read it. It's like there.
mhm.
But how do I correct in my head what this all means? Like, what does it mean? The concepts, and so that changed me because it's like, wow, this is how that works. We're all going back at the concept of going back in time. We're a smaller group of people until we're such a small group of people that we belong to all each other because we're all cousins, because going
Mhm.
back in time it just funnels back. That concept, mind blower.
Yeah.
The concept that, you know, well, hell, the DNA, you have cousin matches that are from freaking Siberia. What the hell
Mhm.
does that mean? Why Siberia? Well, yeah, because we're all very damn closely related. People don't like that. People don't like that.
Yeah, they want the
They,
them and us. Yeah.
because we're tribal. But and so this is what's happening with that group over there, that
Mhm.
some people are not accepting it because of
Well,
their own prejudice in their own areas.
mhm.
Um, you know, and I understand it, but now I believe that I'm closer to the truth because um and let's not overdo the truth. I'm saying what's out there published,
Mhm.
um where it points to, which is that, don't overdo it. We're all pretty connected in a sense. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we're bosom buddy or bosom on the same teat
Mhm.
from birth, but that human beings are human beings because they come from a specific, it's not like we're aliens to each other on that in that sense,
Yeah.
you know even if they're extremely distant, like let's say somebody in the Philippines. um why would you have a Filipino cousin, um just without knowing it in your tree? Well, because even that distant, they're sharing like most of the DNA with you.
Sure. Sure. And people travel, people move, things migrate, people migrate, you know, and you can trace those paths of migration. You're getting into human geography now. And that kind of goes back to that thing about the Spanish people saying, no, 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 I'm Spanish, I'm this, I'm that. You're right in that that's a man-made border. And you can look at a map and you can say, this is Spain. Here are the borders. They
Yeah.
speak this language. There are many subcultures, but this is representative of their culture. You can look at a map and say, this is Germany. Here are the borders. They speak this language. There are subcultures, but they have an overall distinct German culture. But you cannot look at a map and say, this is Catholic, because they're everywhere. You can't look at a map and say, this is red hair, because people with red hair are all over the place.
But you can.
You can, to a certain point, you can find regions, but you're not going to narrow it down to say, this area of Great Britain is red hair.
That's correct. But stick
So,
with that. Stick with that. That you just said is key.
mhm.
You could do it at a regional level and say percentage wise, we have more red hair in this part of Great Britain or the British Isles. You could say that, but if you
Mhm.
try to do the secondary that you're saying, then it's going to be difficult.
Exactly my point. So people go all over the place. You can't look at a map and say, this is people over 65 years of age, because they're everywhere.
Exactly.
You can look at countries like Iceland is a good example and say there is a huge percentage of people over 65 and a huge percentage of people under 25.
Right.
But the people between 25 and 65, proportionally speaking, there are fewer than
Right.
most other places.
Yeah, you can make a list. Like let's say the
So,
British Isles. Go ahead. Go ahead.
so what I'm getting at is people immigrate and emigrate for different reasons all over the world. So when you're talking about human geography, they also call it cultural geography. Basically,
Demography.
what you're doing is you are tracking the movement of people and
Hmm.
seeing where the trends go.
Yeah.
The borders are a man made construct,
Hmm.
but that culture, just Spain, let's say the overall Spanish culture, goes beyond those borders.
Yeah. It spills over.
Exactly.
That's the problem. Just like British culture,
Hmm.
and then there's the transformation problem too. So
Hmm.
let's say you have British culture, or let's say you have English culture, and you have that traveling that you were talking about, which we
Hmm.
do. I mean, that's a given. Um, it may be that a colony gets started in this part of the United States at
Hmm.
this point in time, and this is a branch of that main British culture. But once they're in that colony, certain customs start to evolve just because maybe they don't have the same food source and now they
Right.
have a different variety of how to make the food.
Hmm.
Maybe the language starts to shift because while they're in that colony, certain other fact maybe they have neighbors that were from I don't know,
Hmm.
Canada. Let's say they're Canadian neighbor, and the
Yep.
Canadian neighbors may be from the same original island, let's say,
Hmm.
but because they took different routes and then they're quite next to each other and certain little habit, this and then you have a
Yes.
little bit of crossing of the way you say things or a tradition or two, or maybe the words are written differently. So then all of a
Well,
sudden after a certain time, the English origin has a certain shift in itself, but the American side of the thing, or Americas, or whatever you want to call it,
mhm.
has a different shift in itself, and
Yes.
different, and so now you have but it branched from an original English.
Right. And English is a good example of that because, for instance, you take the way we in America pronounce the letter R. And I believe, and it's the same thing with Canada. Some regions of Canada, not as much. The way we pronounce the letter R, we have that hard R. If you listen to most British accents, they have dropped that hard R and have replaced it with an ah sound. There are some places in the Northeast that did the same thing at about the same time. But most of Southern America at the time, and we're talking about the 1700s, that shift didn't happen. So the overwhelming majority of us in the US and Western Canada, I would say west of, okay, I got to get this right. Alberta, Manitoba, west of Saskatchewan, the majority of Canada also use that hard R. Some places back east, proportionately speaking, maybe about the same as the United States, they don't use that hard R. They'll say here instead of here, or there instead of there. And most British accents have that same thing because we didn't make that shift. So that's a good example of evolution based on location. The French speaking populations of Quebec speak a form of French that was spoken back when that immigration was made. But the French language in France has evolved and theirs didn't. It's the same with the Cajuns down
No,
in Louisiana.
no, both did.
Pardon?
Both the one in France
Hmm.
and the one in Canada separately evolved
Right.
away from each other.
Exactly. That's what I mean. The French, it evolved where this one didn't make that same evolution. It
Right.
evolved differently.
Yes.
And the same thing with the Canadian,
English.
the Cajuns down in Louisiana. Theirs evolved differently as well.
Yeah.
But and you can see the same in Spanish. The various regions in within Spain itself versus Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Mexico,
Mhm.
all of South America, with the exception of Brazil, because they're Portuguese, but
Mhm.
their predominant language is Portuguese. I mean, you can see that's all over the place,
Mhm.
completely different because of the evolution of the language back in its quote unquote motherland was different from where it is here.
Yeah.
You know, we just didn't get the memo, so we're staying this way.
Well, we can't control for that because we simply just go about our business.
Hmm.
Um, One striking example that you wouldn't know because you don't speak Spanish, um, to the degree, but I can tell you, like I could, well, I'll use the example. It's clearer in English, but I have to say this one from Spanish. Argentina,
Hmm.
they officially speak Spanish,
Hmm.
no problem. But unlike every other Spanish spoken around the world,
Hmm.
their Spanish is instantaneously um, noticeable
Hmm.
because in across the 1800s there was an exodus from Italy
Hmm.
before it was Italy or in the course of it becoming Italy, um, and they arrived over there a lot.
Hmm.
And speaking Italian, adapting it to the Spanish that was spoken in Argentina, plus the Argentinians dealing with Italians at the same time because they were immigrating there.
So there was like a crossover.
There is 100%. Well, I don't know 100%, but there's such a crossover that when you listen to it,
Hmm.
you are listening to a Spanish that's clearly Spanish,
Hmm.
but the inflections are Italian.
See now that's interesting to me. I don't speak the language, but that I am that word nerd. But he's going to narrow cast to me for a minute because I've got so many questions. Um, because now I've sometimes wondered that about other languages besides English. Like there are certain accents that the average American can identify like that.
Yeah.
You can identify an Australian accent
Yeah, I've confused it on occasion,
immediately.
but I can confuse it with the other guys next to them, New Zealand. I
Mhm.
sometimes, for some reason, confuse them.
The differences are subtle, but they're there. Now,
Yeah,
to an Australian, they're dramatic. To a New Zealander, they're dramatic. To some, you know, American
outside.
kid up here in Oregon, I have to listen, but I will pick up on it. I was wondering that about Spanish because I know Miami is a melting pot. So you have people from
Yeah,
Ecuador, you have people from Colombia, you got people from all over the place.
everywhere.
But can you pick up? when you hear somebody speaking Spanish, can you pick up, aha, you're from Colombia?
Yeah,
Aha, you're from Argentina.
I
Well, you
can.
just said Argentina is very easy to detect.
Argentina's easy. You could tell when someone's Brazilian and they're
Mhm,
speaking Spanish. We have plenty of Brazilians here.
mhm,
You can tell when someone is the most difficult one to tell for some reason for me
mhm.
is between Cubans and Puerto Ricans.
Okay.
Um, there's a lot of similarities, but you can tell if you really sit, but just a couple of word, like a couple of sentences in
Mhm.
passing, you can't tell if this person is Cuban or Puerto Rican in the way you cannot tell.
Now,
You can't.
do Cubans speak on average speak Spanish very fast, real quickly?
Loud and not angry, but serious,
Okay.
like intentional, like I'm doing
Because
right now.
well, because my travels in the army, I was exposed to a bunch of different cultures, and every Puerto Rican I ever heard talking to another Puerto Rican,
Yeah.
it was almost like they were in a drag race to see who can finish the sentences faster. I mean, they spoke so quick. It just floored me that how anybody could A, talk that fast, and B, understand it that fast. Now, I grown up on the West Coast, a lot of people from Mexico out here, it seemed more laid back and relaxed. I don't know if that's just me. I don't know if that's inflection, but it always seemed to me that the Puerto Ricans spoke Spanish a lot faster than the Mexicans did. So I didn't know if there was anything like that. If it was easy to detect, aha, you're from wherever.
There's over 500 years of,
Mhm,
so in comparison to the United States, this is another thing. I mean, I knew about this, but I never thought further in it, but I have since then doing
mhm,
all this. The Spanish speaking world and all the countries that applies are people that, for the most part, have been in their respective areas,
mhm.
different countries, even though they have that category of Spanish over them,
Sure.
um, for over 500 years,
Yeah.
and they've adapted within
Oh, yeah.
over 500-year time period. And even though there was communication in the ways that there might have been through ships or whatnot between
Yeah.
places and shipments and this and that, because it was a commerce type thing,
Mhm,
um, each place had enough time to develop its own thing. In the Cuban context, region, you could divide it into Caribbean Spanish,
mhm.
Central American Spanish, and South American Spanish. You could do that.
Okay.
There's overlaps,
Yeah.
and the Cuban Spanish, Puerto Rican Spanish, Dominican Spanish, which are the main ones there for Spanish,
In the Caribbean, yeah.
have a Caribbean. There's a Caribbean something there that I'm not an expert to be able to say, but I can tell when I hear it.
Mhm,
Um, that has a more, I don't even know how to explain it. Open. It's familiar to me, so I listen to those people, and
mhm,
I'm saying, oh, they're in the Caribbean. I could tell. So I could
mhm.
tell Caribbean.
Yeah.
You know, uh,
Is it like an inflection or the meter? How kind
it's
of the
loose.
flow. Oh, it's
It's mo-
loose. Okay.
it's
Okay.
more loose.
See, I do get that.
Yeah, it's
I
more
do
loose.
understand that. Okay. All right. That was just interesting to me, and it's not something I've ever been in a position to really ask anybody about without getting told shut up and get out and go, work on that truck or whatever. I
I
couldn't
was
stop my platoon sergeant in mid sentence and go, "Are you just talking fast, or is that just the way you talk?"
I
But
was catching the bus from the Walmart the other day
mhm,
because I want to get, and I'm gonna have to go in a few days. It's been an adventure for me, and I've
yeah,
enjoyed it in a strange sense. It's very weird.
yeah,
And when I got to the stop to get back,
mhm,
there was a gentleman sitting there.
mhm,
And I said, "Oh, is the bus in Spanish?" Because right away I knew it was Spanish. Uh, I said, "Oh, well, has the bus, He says, "No, it's about to come." And we got to talking. He's a Mexican guy and lived here all his life.
mhm,
Um, and I felt compelled to share a little bit of the Spanish, this and that, and
Mhm.
just but just open and say, oh, we're in Mexico, and he explained and stuff, and oh wow, and I said, oh, I once was in the Ensenada, Baja California,
Mhm.
whatnot and stuff, and so, oh, well, I'm from here, and this and that, and I started like slightly pressing him to see what else he said,
Mhm.
and we got into a little bit of the culture conversation,
Mhm.
and he says a lot of the kids today.
Two old men on the bus.
Well, we hadn't gotten on the, but we were in the little
Two
bench.
old men at the bus stop. Okay, well there we
Yeah,
go. All the
which
good
makes it.
ones start that way. These two old guys at a bus stop. Yeah.
Well, no, well, he basically did that. He started saying that, and then he said something. I don't want to miss. I mean, it's not like he's ever gonna know, but he did mention that old thing that we hear a lot about. All this used to be Mexico,
Mhm.
and well, I wasn't gonna get into it with him,
Uh-huh.
so I just basically said, "Oh yeah, 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 yeah." But because there's one you can't be get because I said, "Oh, there's a lot there, man." That's what I thought. I said, "Oh, wait a second. Well, there's a lot there to talk about," but I had to hold myself and say, "Let's just give
Yeah.
him the like." If it's with you, I know that we can get into the
Yeah, we can talk
conversation,
about it. Yeah.
but with him, I couldn't do that. So I just said, "Oh yeah, yeah." But then he said, "No, kids today they're forgetting their language and this and that." So he went through all this whole thing, and but I was pretty happy that I was able to say some things about Mexico a little bit. I'm
Yeah.
not a, I don't know.
You weren't a visitor from another planet, but
Well, no, I felt. What you have to understand is exactly that which I've told you before. My knowledge of you have more knowledge of the Mexican side of things than I would, even though I fall in the category of Spanish speaking world and whatnot.
well, it's a different culture. I mean,
It's a different
I'm
world.
right here. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you're right there. But I felt kind of happy that I was able to throw in some nuggets of what I've learned in recent times.
Mhm.
That and he just accepted it, like said, yeah, that's how that more or less how that worked.
Yeah.
So I felt happy that I was able to share because you can't really
No.
over here in Miami, you can't really you're not gonna bust into some hey, how about out west and this and that. Yeah, they're not gonna uh,
Yeah.
deal with that. It's just not something that's available. So but yeah,
Well,
from Mexico.
Al has a question for you. Did you ask him about La Wawa or the El Autobus? And I know I pronounced that German. Autobus.
I told him told him boost.
Mhm.
I think I told him boost or auto boost because I knew not to say wawa because that wouldn't pan out.
Mhm.
He could tell though
Mhm.
that when I started talking to him because of the different ways we speak, you
Mhm.
could see like I could there's some things that are just
Yeah.
this guy's not he's not really from our clan of Spanish
Yeah.
speakers.
You ain't
You
from around here, are you, boy?
you could tell that very
Yeah.
quickly.
Mhm.
So and Wawa is one telltale sign. If you call a bus a Wawa,
Now, where
uh,
is that from?
that's from the Canary Islands
Oh, okay.
originally,
Okay.
and it was spread into Cuba because
Okay.
so much of the Cuban immigration of the throughout
Okay.
history, but really across the late 1700s and into the 1800s was strong
Mhm.
Canary Island people. So yeah,
Okay. The Canadians are having fun with us here. Jim's from Wawa. That's the town that Jim lives in, right?
that's pretty freaking cool. It means bus to us in Miami. So you live on a bus.
Have you seen Jim lately? He looks like he lives on a bus. Of course, I got nothing to say to that because before I got the haircut and beard trim, I looked like I lived under a bus. So,
The cool things that have been learned or that have been in learn is it's really been very interesting to me, and I've gone in head first with the
mhm,
stuff. I don't know. I know less. I know there's more that I don't know than I do know under these categories. But the little things that I do know are like little roadmaps that well wait a second this and that that help you navigate and stuff. But people believe. things that they grew up with, like you were saying, culturally, um, about what should be, and if they don't align, it becomes a point of contention.
Mhm.
Um, and all this to do with DNA and all this and that is a big point of contention for people. Um, if they even look into it and they have predetermined ideas of what should be,
Mhm.
it's a big point of contention because we grew up with the world that we grew up in, understanding it the way we did.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's a big
Well,
one.
we don't like to be challenged on our preconceived notions. So, you know.
No,
Um, Greg says the irony is there is no bus out of Wawa. Okay, Jim says actually, okay, here's where Mark screws up a Native American name. Michipicoten. I don't know the inflection of the
Michipicoten.
I don't know the inflection of the nations back there, but it's
That sounds
part
like
of
Michigan.
Wawa. But years ago it was Michipicotem. That sounds very, very close to um, Aztec.
Does it?
The way I pronounced it, it does. I mean, I'm used to this out here. I know Multnomah, I know Willamette, I know um, Yankala, things like that. It's a different meter, it's a different smoothness, and certain letters are pronounced differently. We try to anglicize it, and it doesn't work. But the
I, I,
some of the Algonquin languages back in the east, they give me trouble. It's like they throw consonants in there just to screw you up, you know.
there's a word in one country. I saw this meme the other day, and I think man, I wish I remembered which country it was. I doubt it was Canada. It could be. I doubt it was. But the word on the grocery store frontage
Mhm.
goes from one end of the grocery store to the other, and
Yeah,
it's one word,
yeah.
and it was native or something to that effect, and that's just how it is.
See, now, Jim, you're not helping because what you're doing is you're replacing one word with another word I can't pronounce. So you're not, it means the bluff's in. Okay, if you say so.
So
But
look, let me tell you this one bit here. I don't know if you've seen it or not. I saw a terrible version of it. I wish I would have seen a good one, but I saw it on YouTube. But whatever. There's a movie from like 2005 by Mel Gibson.
uh-huh.
I don't know if it was Welsh. I, that's the first thing that I thought, but I know that
Is it
Welsh has these
Braveheart?
long. No, no, I'm responding to
Okay.
what you just put out. He
Oh,
said
okay.
Welsh.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was Welsh. It makes sense that it would be Welsh, but I remember it. Well, here goes the memory thing. I remember that it was a native name of a town somewhere in your neck of the woods or roughly in that general broad
Okay.
vicinity. So I think it was in the United States somewhere, but I can't. I would keep beating myself. I couldn't. If I think of it or come across it, I guess I'll share it. But it was long
Uh-huh.
from one end of the sun of the grocery store to the other. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was like, I mean, nobody can sit, but
Well,
whatever.
it, it may have been in Wales because they like to do that. Everybody has heard of the that
News
big, yeah,
anchors.
there you go. That's the name of it. And I can say Clandicilio go go go, and that's about it. I can get the last part from about the last double L.
Okay, so I can tell you that from what my memory can account for right now
Mm-hmm.
is that it was a grocery store. It felt like it was either American or Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
This is just from going from memory, and it was in a small town that had a lake, and that or the town was or the lake or something was had a long ass freaking name, and it was native. And then for some reason, the grocery store named itself after the darn thing, and it's hilariously extended.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, look what Linda just wrote. What the heck is that?
This town in Wales is not the longest place name in the world.
But you can see it from there.
It's the second longest. This one is the longest, and it's in New Zealand. I don't know how you pronounce it, but I do know it starts out as Taumatawata. Taumatawakatangi. I used to know how to pronounce it. But anyway, um, the thing to remember about Welsh is the double L's is not pronounced as an L. It's kind of a sound. We have no sound in the English language. It's kind of a so a Llanffarb will I can't say it.
Celio Gogo.
But I can remember the last double L. It's Llandesilio go go go.
That's insane.
It's one of these days I'm going to sit and study it, and that's going to be my party trick. The ability to say that.
But here's the problem, though, Mark. And I
Mhm.
understand it's a different culture and different language. I
Mhm.
get it. But here's the thing, from my vantage point, limited
Mhm.
to my perspective. Not all the words are like that, right?
No.
Okay, because
Well,
I'm thinking to myself, if go ahead.
I can't say that. Not every word is that long, because that's actually a phrase. You know, the church by the rock, by the river, by the this. You know, they kind of put it together as kind of a touristy thing. But Welsh, the Welsh language is unique among other languages in that it has some very strange rules to it.
No, I'm
So,
just
but
saying that if I could barely imagine, I mean, because when you read a paragraph
mhm,
in English, obviously I'm accustomed to it, but like just the average words, or not average,
mhm,
but like the words that connect things, like the,
mhm,
here, there, was, are simply, and then your as complicated as a word can be, it's still compact
uh-huh.
in English. Mark's
Well,
hearing, looks
yeah,
like he's working on something.
it
English is compact in general,
yeah, to a point. Now they
from my
are,
perspective.
yes, but we basically took words from other languages and adapted them and adopted them and then
Naturally.
mashed them up into ours. But we have some weird spellings as well. But that's influence from other languages.
You have to grow up with it to really, unless you're, but you have to really grow up with it
Mhm.
to accept all the contradictions.
And I don't blame people who say that English is a hard language to learn. If it is your second language, now as a child, it's easier for you to learn a language than it is as an adult. So if you're 30 years old plus and you come to this country and you're trying to learn English, I understand. I feel your pain. I was that transplant in Germany trying to learn German. I got some of it. I didn't get a lot of it. So uh, I get it. And we don't help ourselves. I'm here to tell you, because we have some off the wall spellings. The OUGH, like in enough, OUGH, there are 8 ways that can be pronounced. So if a person is reading, they don't know what the hell
You
they're
know,
reading.
you know what? Sometimes,
Hmm.
really, if I'm doing something and my mind is racing and I'm trying to write something, one, two words that confuse me, there and there. When I'm writing, I will
Hmm.
sometimes along the way write there
Hmm.
with a E-R-E as
Hmm.
opposed to the um, I-R-E, when they should be opposite, because I'm zooming through,
Hmm.
because I'm thinking phonetically when I'm thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and then I type phonetically quickly the one that appropriately just off
Yep.
the cuff. But when I reread,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, holy crap!
Yeah.
And I'll sit for a moment and say, did I do that because I'm right, or did I do that because I'm wrong, or is it because I'm wrong because I feel it's wrong? And I have to read the sentence over and say, no, wait a second. And that one, for some reason, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when I'm working on something bigger, that my mind is on the concept, not the actual
Mm-hmm.
breakdown, and then I'll have to stop and actually correct myself and say, well, wait.
That when I was a kid growing up, that was a tough one for me to remember too, and I didn't really understand why they thought they needed three spellings for the same word until I finally understood that they're three different words with three different meanings. So the way I was taught to memorize it was go for the first two, and when you know they're wrong, go for the third one. So there, THERE, is the opposite of here. So, and the word here is in it. So if you mean there, just add a T to the word here. And I'm like, okay, light bulb, I got it. If you mean they are,
Then it's the
then
ER.
you replace the A with the apostrophe. Okay,
Oh,
I can wrap
there.
my head around that.
But
There,
there.
right. So if it's not there, meaning over there, and if it's not they are, it's got to be the other one. THIER or EIR, IER. See, now I'm second
IER.
guessing myself. IER, yes.
Yeah.
So that's how I learned that in like fourth grade, something like that, third grade, fourth grade.
Another.
But it took me a while to figure it out. And here, like here, right here, and here, I hear you. Now, the way I was taught to remember that is what do you hear with? Your ear. It's in the word HEAR. You hear with your ear. Oh, okay.
That
Light bulb
one's for some
makes
reason that
sense.
one's never really. But I'm saying that, like, generally recently,
Mm-hmm.
I've written some stuff, and as I'm writing, I'll throw in the wrong there,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and and when I look at it back, I'm like, oh, whoa, I did that. Like, I'll do that.
Yeah. What about there? So it is EIR. I thought I was right. Thank you, Wow.
EIR.
EIR. EIEIR.
Yeah, well, that's the one I was meaning. That
Mm-hmm.
one and the THERE.
Yeah. Well, that's how I learned it. You have here, I'm here, add a T to it, and it's there. Okay. Now I get it.
Well, because then you have the one with the th. Um,
T
you
H E
say
Y apostrophe R E.
there with the er at the end.
T
So
H E
there,
Y THEY apostrophe R E.
that one.
They
So
are.
now, right. So there's all these little variations, and if you want to write and you don't want to seem to, or at least in my mind, you're trying to write out a sentence
Uh huh.
and you're saying something to the effect of, "It is a great way of doing things,"
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you want to sort of, and you just, it's, the
You
it's.
want to be correct.
Well, no, what I'm trying to get at is that you can shorten it. Like what I'm trying to get at is that you can shorten the English situation.
Mm-hmm.
You can do little workarounds if you stop thinking, because you want to think or if you if you if you want to write something more, I don't know if you can call it colloquial or relaxed or just like buddy buddy talking,
Mm-hmm.
you can do that in writing as opposed to saying something so logistic, let's say, where
Mm-hmm.
you're pronouncing or you're
Mm-hmm.
writing out all the words so that the person reading it would in
Right.
theory be pronouncing each word. You can shorten, and you could work around that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
um,
We could.
but when you're
We could.
dealing with a big thing and you don't, I guess, revise it or look
Mm-hmm.
at it, that there could be one that I screw up.
Yep.
um there's also the issue of, like, in Spanish, now that have been writing more in Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
like I've been working at it. I use translator, but I am
Mm-hmm.
literally trying to think about writing it that way.
Yeah.
um for the word photo in
Mm-hmm.
English, there's no there's no way around you picturing the ph.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no way around it. But in
Right.
Spanish, it's not only pronounced the same.
Hmm.
Well, no, it's only pronounced the same,
Right.
but it's written different. It's just
With an F, right?
Foto, and you're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. It was that way in Germany too. They didn't use the PH, they used the F.
It's virtually the same thing because the phonetic ph
Hmm.
is really an F sound.
Hmm.
So but that word, that sort of, every time I write it in Spanish, in my mind as I'm writing it, I'm thinking, yeah, but in English it's ph. Huh, that's so curious. Like my mind is thinking,
Yep.
because I'm dealing with two languages, and I'm thinking, wow. And there's a lot of those little things like that.
Hmm.
And the main problem with it when I write it in Spanish is that in English we go from one spot to the next in an idea
Hmm.
written out
Hmm.
in a specific order. You could twist it
Yep.
around.
That's the syntax. Yeah.
The syntax, you could twist it around and still sound great. Sometimes you want a better shortcut to get the idea across, but in Spanish, that's not always going to work out if you
Yep.
translate it. And I've seen it a lot.
And it's the same way in German because the words can be moved around. We have a different syntax than they do.
Yeah, and here's the trick. When I'm talking to these people in that group
Hmm.
and I'm writing to them in Spanish. So I'm using the translator. So
Hmm.
what I do is I write in English in the
Hmm.
translator. I read it in Spanish to see if it sounds good the way I would listen to my dad, mom, and
Hmm.
grandparents. I think, is that how they would have said it more or less? Because it's a big deal.
It is.
I can speak Spanish on a continual basis with normal conversation things like
Hmm.
food. Oh, did you like your vacation? I like the vacation. Blah 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 blah. I could do normal, but if you're gonna try to get over an idea that's intricate and involved, you have to be very careful because now you're dealing with something serious, not just like cultural laid back, let's say, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Serious misunderstandings can happen.
Right. So there's also that to factor in when I'm telling people what I'm telling them. But I think that I've found a good trick, more or less, within using translator and me revising it with my English and then rereading the span. And I do that when you see
Hmm.
my writings in Spanish. That's what I've actually done.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm sitting there typing away in Spanish. No,
Mm.
I'm
That
actually using the
the
tools.
translator. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I think that some people are starting to think in the groups that I'm more fluent in writing because I think I'm fluent
Yeah.
than I actually am. And maybe I have my little hangups in how I write.
Well,
So there might be thinking that
but
I have more ability, um, or they might be thinking I'm freaking all screwed up because I might be right. Here's the thing: I don't know if it's as sound as what I'm thinking that it is.
yeah.
I don't have the ability to check whether I'm sound enough
Yeah.
once I've done all that translating and changing,
Hmm.
because I don't have the background literature in Spanish to tell the difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
I,
don't
I do
know.
get it.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think I kind of am. Are
Hmm.
people being kind and not saying, "Hey, you're writing poorly,"
You
or
sound
is
like a hillbilly. You write like a hillbilly or something like that.
it? I
Yeah.
use the intricate words, or not intricate, but more nuanced words that I use in English,
Hmm.
translate them to Spanish, and when something doesn't sound right as someone on the street here in Miami would talk,
Hmm.
I switch it until it sounds right, and I
Hmm.
do it quick. I'm
Yeah.
working on it. I'm saying this is what I want to say, and this is how I want to translate it,
Yeah.
or this is how it translates. Does it sound right?
Hmm.
And if it sounds more or less right after switching over certain sentences that don't align,
Yeah.
that's what I put out.
Okay. Okay.
Is that crazy?
I don't think it's crazy at all. I don't think it's crazy at all. You know, you're
But did
skeptical in your trust of the translator, which is always a good thing. because you don't want to say your daughter's pregnancy brings much joy to our village. You know, help, there's a hog in my kitchen. Like, what is this guy talking about?
Because one time I got really attacked in a group,
Uh,
a Spanish group, because I wrote something and I decided to write it street Miami street Spanish
uh-huh.
because I was being like loose with it.
Mhm.
They did
They
not
tore you
accept.
up.
They did
Well,
not like that. So they're a little bit more
mhm.
serious about how you write
Yeah.
your stuff in Spanish.
Mhm.
They'll
Well,
take it up with you in that
it
way.
also depends on what kind of a group you're in. If you're in a laid back group that don't care, then fine. But if you're in a scholarly group, yeah, you better be scholarly.
Yeah.
So it's funny you're talking about this because we have a microcosm of this going on over in the chat because Greg posted I before E except after C. Then Jim went on a roll here, typing out all of the exceptions to that rule. And Jim is right. I know down here, I don't know about up there. I was taught that too. I before E except after C. And it was about 5 years, maybe 6 years after I was taught that, they stopped teaching that rule because, as it turns out, there are more violations of that rule than there are words that follow that rule. And it's just, big. And I remember saying that when they said I before E except after C, I said, but wait a minute, weird is spelled Weird. And my
Mhm.
teacher said, well, weird is a weird word.
Yeah, but see,
And I went, oh, okay, all right. But I'm in fifth grade. What do I know? Fourth grade. What do I know?
no, but you see what I'm saying though?
Mhm.
That's not a proper answer, but yet
No.
let's close the page on that one and keep moving.
But I'm a
You
fourth
know,
grader questioning a teacher who was like, all right, smart aleck. Well, weird is a weird word. All right, fine. But later on down the road, after I'm out of high school and married and gone, I find out that they're not even teaching that anymore because there are more words that don't follow that rule than do follow that rule. So it's like, okay, fine. It's just, I mean, sometimes it's more important to know that we have a system because, and we know the system works. But when, like a traffic light, we all know that green means go, red means stop, and yellow means stop if you can do so safely. We can't pick our own rules to that. We have a system. The system has to be in place, and everybody has to use that system to get along. If you, as an individual, decide, no, red means go, green means stops, and yellow means close your eyes and hope for the best, we're in trouble.
with language,
So,
I believe that that's true with language.
mhm.
And in the cases it's not true, and the only one that I can think of currently is a long-winded one, which is across time when things become codified because of usage,
Mhm.
things might shift, and that's part of the normal process. But
Yeah.
if you try to do what you're saying, introduce some wacky thing, and you're trying to convey an idea,
Mhm.
people aren't going to be able to freaking crack that code you're trying to. So
Well,
it's best you stick with some serious generalized rules.
yeah, you can introduce new things, and we do need some new things. There was a punctuation mark, and we need to land the plane. Oh my God, we're going on. We're past 2.5 hours.
Okay.
There was a punctuation mark that was introduced in the 50s, and it actually started to gain traction. And it was called the interrobang. And what it is it's a question mark with an exclamation point right through the middle of it. They call it an interrobang. The interro, and then for the question mark, and then the bang, that's a printer's slang word for an exclamation point.
So is it between a question mark and an emphasis type?
Yes, it's like you're saying, there's a sudden exclamation that is a question. What the hell? Well, it's a question, but it's also you want emphasis on it, so it's used for things like that. What are you doing? You know,
You could do that one after the other too.
they do that now, but it gained in popularity, then it kind of went away. And there was actually even a key on some IBM typewriters that had it. And it is part of the computer Unicode. If your font has that interrobang, you can add it into something that you're typing.
That's a
So
weird one.
yeah, and
I mean,
I think it's cool.
well, yeah, because it says, but you could do that like in comic books, like they'll do the
Hmm.
exclamation points and then the
Hmm.
um. Just two final things about this language, and then just one final thing. At least on my end, I I the more I've written my little stories, the more comfortable I've gotten. I can't self judge how within the sphere of readable they are, or readable to digestible, let's say,
Hmm.
they are from my perspective. I find this situation, I can do it more than I do in Spanish, that's for sure. But because I can read somebody else's thing and say, wow, I just read that, it ran smooth, and I use that as a template. But when it
Hmm.
comes to you self reading what you've written,
Yeah,
I'm very critical. I'm looking at it and stuff,
yeah,
but I try to take the approach of relaxed, just telling the
yeah.
story, whatever I want to tell. Um, but I can't self judge proper if it's
I'm with you.
easily sent out there.
I'm with you.
Um, but I have been given some compliments when I share in the Miami groups,
Hmm.
talking about some sort of the bridge and Sweetwater and stuff. And so that gave me an inkling, like, oh, the person liked the story, but did they
Hmm.
like it because it's a cool story in itself, or did they like it because it was well written? I don't know.
Hmm.
But so there's always that doubt in my mind. Wow, am I giving this out properly enough so that it makes sense and it doesn't stumble, and that's one of the cool things. So I like the whole thing about writing. I really do. um
Yeah, it's I if you read something I've written, I appear to be a hell of a lot more intelligent than I really am, mainly because I'm 100% supported by spell check and grammar check. Without them, I'm dead in the water. I don't even try. You know, I used to be pretty good at, and it's hard for me to admit as an English major. I used to be really good at this stuff, but I have forgotten more than I ever learned. And if you don't use it, if you
you
don't
lose.
write professionally, you will lose it. And it's the same thing with learning a new language. I have forgotten more German than I ever learned. So I can understand it, but
Yeah.
forming a reply is difficult, you know,
Well, yeah, I mean,
and especially if I'm reading it. I do have to rely on Google Translate.
yeah, and thank
So,
goodness it's there.
yeah. Oh, yeah, big time.
It makes everybody better if they're into writing. It
Yeah.
makes everybody's work, I mean, considering that, because there's some laziness out there as well when people try to explain. So look, I guess I just want to say this. So when you're trying to transmit an idea to somebody, and it's something that's you're trying to really get
Hmm.
those little grains of sand, shaken out of
Yeah.
that, you're trying to really do that. I've noticed that some people, especially in a back and forth, they leave a lot to be desired in terms of, like,
Hmm.
really state your case, like state, like give me the important points that I need to digest from what you're saying, and then explain it, or do something so that I get the trajectory of where you're going. But a
Hmm.
lot of people, especially in those groups that we were talking about before, will give a lot of assertion stuff and won't detail out as to, so you're left with, like, you have to sort of drag it out of people in order to get anywhere. Just
Yeah.
address the points, address them good,
Hmm.
um or well.
Well, to me, that's an admission that they can't address the point.
But it also can be that another issue in their mind, they have the information, but their writing part of it, they're assuming that you're gonna that it's enough what they're writing, so that you know what they know that they're trying to transmit to you, and it's just
Um,
not. It's not
yeah.
sufficient. There's that problem too. That there's some people out there may
Yeah.
not.
Be
It may
specific. We're trying to communicate here. Let's talk.
it may be exactly what you just said, Mark.
Hmm.
That you know that, or it could be that issue, that other issue that they're just
Hmm.
assuming that what they're
That you
saying,
already know.
yeah, that it's enough. That what they're saying is
Hmm.
obvious,
Yeah.
and it's not. You need to be very, especially when it's a complicated thing like that.
Hmm.
You know. Um, so, anyways, the last thing that I wanted to say, there was a movie from 2005. I think it was directed by Mel Gibson. I saw it the other night, but it was bad because it was like one of those YouTube video channels that increase the size of the image so
Yeah.
YouTube doesn't catch them and this and that. Um, and it's called Apocalyptica or
Uh-huh.
Apocalypto, something like
Mhm.
that.
Apocalyptica. I've heard of it.
Okay, so I always wanted to see it, but I had never, and I saw it in the worst way possible. The whole story is about native people somewhere in Mexico,
Hmm.
back before anybody ever arrived, and it's one tribe trying to attack another tribe, and the families and stuff, and they're just going through all that stuff. The whole movie is them in the jungle
Hmm.
trying to get away from these other people, getting butchered. It's just tribal warfare in
Hmm.
the jungle. And as the movie gets along, it gets worse and worse. I mean, it's crazy in the jungles and this and that. And at the end, they're running after this one guy, and they're running. They break through the trees, and there's a beach,
Hmm.
and the one guy stops, and then the other guy gets there because he's gonna attack him. And when he gets there, he breaks through the thing, sees the beach, and then he stops. And they're just both standing there. They just threw a terrible battle,
Hmm.
and the camera pans out towards the ocean, and you see the Spanish galleons. Dude, I got chills,
Yeah.
and they were multiplying because they gave us in that movie. I should watch it in a whole movie in the jungle,
Hmm.
and you're invested inside here, but it wasn't. The cliffhanger was that just when the movie ends, which it ends there,
Hmm.
after all their struggles, they part the trees. There's the beach and the sand, and in the fog, these galleons with the huge red crosses, white flags,
Hmm.
sitting offshore, and little boats sail, and they're like just looking with blank faces.
Hmm.
And what they don't say is already in your head because you know, like the story that
Hmm.
from that point on,
Oh crap.
things are gonna change from that point on.
Hmm.
And they've been through this whole battle.
Hmm.
They're like unending. It was, dude. It was so. I think it was Mel Gibson, dude. What a great! And I saw it on a crappy screen, so it's an
Hmm.
crappy whatever. It's unfortunate, but I liked it. It was freaking crazy, dude.
Hmm.
So just putting that out there, if you guys ever um see it.
Okay, I'll check it out. I'll check it out. Now, again, as I said at the beginning of tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead over to our Trampled Underfoot podcast Facebook page. I will post a link to that Rick Beata video, the real reason why music is getting worse. It's eye opening. It's maybe contentious. You may not agree with some of it, but I'd be hard pressed to disagree with the conclusion he's
Yeah,
come to. It's
it was really
really
well.
interesting. Like I said, a little over 12 minutes long, not a huge investment of your time, but if you're a music fan, it's well worth the watch. So, and again, thank you, Steve. I'll post it over on our Facebook page, Trample Underfoot Podcast on Facebook.
So, well, first thing I'd like to thank you guys for hanging out with us. But I do want to say that none of the opinions here by us two hosts in any way imply that Greg himself agrees to any of it,
Except
or
except the Nigerian Prince part. He likes that part.
except that one. Yeah, I really I like that one too. I think that that's key. That's key. um, in any case, thank you guys for hanging out. We hope you enjoyed it. And nothing, enjoy the rest of your week. We go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time here on the Trampled Underfoot podcast show on YouTube. We have that site on Facebook, which Mark will be linking that really cool video. I thought it was great too. Um, and then we have a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com. And we're sponsored by
Harneal Media. You know him, you love him, you want to support him. So reach out to him. Go over to harnealmedia.com, click the contact us button, and give him your Christmas list. Steve, I need a website. I want it to do this, I want it to do that, and I want it to do the other. Oh, and if you can you make it do this too? I'm willing to bet you that he can. Unless it's something goofy like I want to win the lottery. We all do. He can't arrange that. If he could, I wouldn't be telling you about it. Anyway, do yourself a favor. Get over to harnealmedia.com. Check him out. Very, very competitively priced. And the best thing about it is he gives you performance. He does not give you excuses. I'm proud to call him a friend. He's the only website guy I will ever refer. And there's a link in the description of everything on this channel, and it's that way for a reason. So hit him up, harnealmedia.com. That's HARNEAL media.com. Sponsor of trampledunderfootpodcast.com.
All right. All right. So, guys, thank you very much. Enjoy your week. As I mentioned before, be safe doing the things that you love. If you need to be safe doing them, I don't know why, but just be safe in general.
What if I love tightrope walking while sword swallowing and spinning a fire knife?
Be as safe as you can doing that.
Okay.
Within the bounds of reason.
Okay.
I would opt. I would suggest don't do that. But if you're into
But if
that,
that's what I love to do,
yeah, who's gonna stop you? Shine on,
the
shine on.
police.
All right, guys. Peace.
Peace.